So I'll call the meeting to order at 6:01. And we have Chris as our minute taker. At this time, is there any public comment? Okay, not. Sorry, everybody's hopping around. I saw Nancy. Nancy, there you are.
Yes, thanks. I just wanted to ask, is the meeting being recorded?
I believe Sean is on and recording. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
And then I saw one other hand and it disappeared. Was it Herb?
Yes, it was. Do you hear me?
I can. Oh, now you're muted.
Unmute and see my pretty face. Come on. Oh, jeez. It keeps bouncing around.
Yeah.
Well, okay, there we go. Oh, in all my glory. Sorry about that, folks. I sent around a proposal that I hope the board can consider tonight. I think the board is trying to get a path towards how they're going to conduct the exploration of proposals over the next few months. And one thing that I've been thinking for a while that, it'd be real helpful to have sort of a common basis of, what are the financial and staffing issues? And then I'm thinking, with the board's call for proposals, two things there. First, the people who want to make proposals should probably have a, sort of a baseline of information, which I think would be helpful, which I suggest. And also, the board's going to need some way, and the community's going to need some way to compare, alternative proposals. So I'm offering this as a sincere just way to try to clear out some of the background noise and help the board and the community, and I kind of hope that the administration, in terms of going forward, what the staffing and the financial issues are. So I hope you will consider the kind of spreadsheet tool that I sent to you. I think it would be helpful. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you. I think just a brief kind of response in that, in fairness to anyone who might want to submit a sort of tool for the board to consider, we should probably post it on a future agenda so that if someone else or another group has a tool they'd like us to consider, that we look at them, we here open to all and not just one that came in that we're going to without giving warning. So and the other piece is it is the intention of the board to have and the administration to have that workshop to kind of give a baseline of information so that everybody's working with similar information as they prepare. So if we don't get specific about the tools at this meeting, I'm sure we're going to revisit it again at another meeting. So. Okay, any other comment?
John, could you ask all folks to mute who aren't speaking?
Sure. So if you're not speaking, if you wouldn't mind muting, there is a little background noise. Okay. All right, so we're going to get started. We have a few things to get to, and then we'll get through a little board orientation and we'll move through our agenda. So our next item is the consent agenda. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved, Krista.
Krista, is there a second?
I see Liz's hand up.
Okay, Liz Sayer has her hand up. Okay, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, if you can just give me a thumbs up on this one, I'll screen everybody. Okay. All right. Okay, the people that I can see, I am seeing enough that it passes. I can't see Dave at the moment. Okay, so that motion passed. All right, the next is an update regarding the DMG. Patrick.
Yeah, I included this in the agenda in the hopes that I'd have something today. When I last talked with Nate, he thought early this week he'd have something for me, yet I haven't seen it, so I don't have an update on the DMG at this point. Hopefully next time we meet.
Okay, all right. Okay, so next we'll move on to board management and governance, the discussion around a little training.
All right, Dawn, I just had a question, but I'm trying to wave my hand. You may not
Sorry.
see me.
I can't, everybody's not on the same page, so and I'm sorry, please.
No, that's okay. And I couldn't find my mute button. I just wanted to ask Patrick while we're on the topic, when we originally talked about working with the DMG, I think the board was interested in having a chance to connect with them as well and to talk about what we hope to get out of their work, questions we might want to be sure that are answered. And as we're thinking about some of the information that we want to be sure is consistent across proposals and all of that, I'm just wondering when you see that opportunity happening for the board to connect directly with them.
Yeah, I don't know that I can necessarily be clear about when I see that happening, but I think once we see the draft proposal from DMG, have a little back and forth there. I think part of that conversation will then be, when's the earliest opportunity for Nate and or representatives from the team to come and meet with the board and have an exchange there to make sure that we're dialed in the way that we want to be dialed in. So I think obviously that would be one of the very next things that would happen after we feel like we have a working proposal.
Okay, any other questions about that? DMGs? Sorry, I gotta scroll through.
Sandy, Don, I don't know if you can
Okay.
see me.
Yep, Sandy.
Oh, thanks. So, Patrick, to follow up from Krista's question, and again, I apologize since this is only my second meeting, so this may be information you've provided in prior meetings. Do we have an outline of what you've requested the GMG specifically do? Like, did you provide them something in writing? And then you just refer me to it. Obviously, I'm coming in right at the end there.
No, everything that has happened so far has been through conversation I've had with Nate, reflecting on board conversations and what the board's been looking for sort of a third-party analysis of the recommendation I made, which is how this originated, which then evolved into working with the DMG to evaluate other recommendations, including bringing some of their own. So that's the gist of the conversation I've had with the DMG, and it's a little different than what they typically do. So they're working up a proposal that captures what we've talked about, which is something the board can then review with the associated cost estimates. And then once we have something that feels workable, we can then start to put some things in place and have a kind of meeting between DMG, Nate, board, and kind of get things going.
And when you say it's something different than what DMG typically does, what is it that DMG typically does? I'm not familiar with the consultant, I've heard a little bit, but not a lot.
Yeah, so the two things that they do more typically than what we're asking them to do are start at the very beginning, like where we started 18 months ago, engaging the community and kind of working through the whole process, or at the tail end, do sort of a more cursory review of a few options. And we didn't really feel like either of those made sense given where we are. So we wanted kind of a hybrid of the two. And that's what's a little different. but very workable. It was never no, we can't do that. It was okay, we'll just have to kind of blend a couple of the different strategies that we typically use and have it fit what we're looking for.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Do board members have any other questions? If board members don't mind, I see Nancy has a question, and before we move on, I thought I'd give her a chance. That's all right.
Thanks, Dawn. I should have said this earlier under public comment. I didn't realize that accepting Caleb's resignation would happen under the consent agenda, but I absolutely want to recognize his contribution to the board and to our kids. And I wanted to say that losing him as a board member, I think, is a huge loss to the group. And I'm very concerned about it. And I'm hoping that it might be, I am hoping that it might be possible. And I imagine that the board would want to do this, although I don't know if Caleb is willing. But it seems to me that given the suddenness of his resignation, it might be wise to conduct an exit interview with him if he's willing, and to share the results of that interview with the rest of the board. So I'd just like to publicly thank him, and I wish the board might take some time at some point in this meeting to do the same, because we owe him gratefulness for what he's done for the board and for kids.
Thank you. There is another opportunity later where we're going to be discussing this, and I imagine some of that will come up in conversation. All right. Sorry, everybody's moved again. I wish I could lock you all on one screen so I could see well at one time. All right, our next item is into the discussion around board orientation and training. So included in the agenda was a short video from Susan Mogensen at Brown Dog Consulting. Sandy got access to her modules today or this week, so she could start working through the modules that we've all been through. So I hope you're finding it useful if you got a chance to get started. Okay, so I didn't know if there were any thoughts that you wanted to share that we all might take into consideration, or I might share back with Susan about the video she sent. Dave?
Thank you. So I did do all the modules and have interacted and participated with this new to me concept of policy governance. And I think that under the umbrella of policy governance, there is a relatively broad way to interpret that and run boards, whether they're for-profit boards that actually make widgets or sell pizzas, and nonprofit boards and municipal boards like ours. And one of the things that continues to concern me, and I see this in other entities that are operating by policy governance, that there is a finance committee. And I think that we sign these payment affidavits monthly. We have a fiduciary responsibility to our taxpayers, and I don't think we're fulfilling it without a finance committee. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments, Sandy?
How would we, as part of our process, be able to put a committee like that together? Would it be part of a motion or something we would put on the agenda specifically? Because I do think that's an interesting point from David, because it does involve really detailed work, and sometimes that extra work that a committee can do can really bring, can can summarize things much better for the rest of the board.
So the last time this was brought up in front of the board, we had an agenda item and we talked about it and we discussed it. And then as a group, that group at the time decided that the policy, they read through the policy and talked about how that affected making this decision. And their decision was that this was the responsibility of the entire board, not the responsibility of just a few people to oversee it. It was the board's responsibility to all understand it and be watching it kind of, or, be looking at it and monitoring the financial conditions. So it would have to be an agenda item again, and we'd have to go through the same process of looking at our policies and discussing and making a determination that way.
Okay. I only just bring that up because, granted, we're having meetings every 2 weeks. It's pretty busy right now. And these meetings are very long because we have so much packed into them, understandably. But one of the benefits of an additional committee that I would expect every board member to maybe even be part of if need be, is that you can invite, Floyd to come, who can talk at length, to specific meetings so that we can be informed and have questions and answers that would really be almost, I think, it's very cumbersome in our board meetings, which are full of so many things that we have to address. So, and I'm not as familiar with how we build our agendas, Dawn. So I don't know if that's something that can be a discussion directly with you, that's not a quorum, or that can be expressed. I don't know how we, as an individual board member, how we could advocate for certain items to be on the agenda, other than at the board meeting.
So we did just talk about this through a monitoring report. We talked about the process of setting the agenda, and it really is outlined in our policy.
Okay.
And then if you look at that last monitoring report on that, there were some suggestions about additions to the policy, to some changes to make it more usable, or give board members a way to participate more in the decision. So I would say let's go back and look at that monitoring report, and then
Okay. Great. Because I did just take the policy. I did 2 of the modules that you sent me from Brown Dog.
Mhm.
And what I thought was really interesting was that, part of the process of the board meetings is the board directing what happens. But my past experience as a board member was that as individual board members, I felt very disenfranchised from the process of what actually was determined, for the agenda versus, trust me, I have a lot of trust in you, Don. So I'm not saying, I know you're deep in the work of being the chair, but I know a lot of that is working with Patrick, which is totally appropriate to build the agenda. But I'll look at the monitoring, but I often felt that as individual board members, I didn't really have any role. Like I didn't have a way of expressing that. So I'll look back at the monitoring, and if I have any questions, I'll follow up later.
And the other place to look is at the board work plan that we set every August. We look at that and determine, sort of lay out the year-long work for the board. So that's the other place that falls, that we look to when we're planning the agenda. We first look there and say, okay, this is what we've said we're going to do for these months, and follow that members have input on as we build it at the retreat.
Right. But of course, these issues, I don't think people quite anticipated the extent of the current issues that we had probably when you had your August board retreat. So just trying to figure out how to help contribute to ongoing agendas in a reasonable manner. But I'll look at the other stuff, Don, and I'll contact you separately.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Liz?
Also, I haven't read it yet, but at one point you had given us, I have a booklet on something, it's called Future Planning. And so maybe that's something we could all take a point to read as well.
Yes, that future focused agenda book was helpful too. I think Sandy will have to see. Patrick, isn't that the one everybody got a copy of?
Yes, it is.
Yep. And so maybe I'll have to get in contact with Sarah McLean and see if she still has her copy and she could loan, send it on to you or something, because that's helpful as well. Dave, is your hand up again, or is that from before?
It's up again. I just wish you'd remind me when that discussion took place, and because I don't recall it. So maybe it happened before I was on the board.
Which discussion are you talking about?
About whether to have a finance committee or not.
Yeah, that did happen before you were on the board. So, but I'm not guaranteeing like next week it's going to be on the agenda, but we can, as we build, we can look for a place where there's space to have that discussion and
Thank you.
as a group. Okay. All right. Any other feedback on that video clip that was in the agenda?
Hey, Don.
Oh, Steve, there you are.
Sorry.
Nope.
You might. I'm thinking that you had a, or I think that what came out of that monitoring report discussion was sort of using a tool to fill out to make an agenda request.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you've emailed that around. Is that on our drive? Is that in a folder on our drive?
It's actually in that, I'm sorry, it's actually in that future focused agenda book, workbook kind of thing that everybody has. There is a couple of samples in there.
Right, but you had sent out an actual document.
Yeah, that was, I think it was a copy of one of those, but I can look and resend it. I don't know that it's anywhere. Maybe it's attached to the minutes.
I'm just wondering if it might be helpful to post it in our drive.
Okay.
And that way everybody can find it.
Okay. I'm ready to know. Okay. All right, and I'll just keep moving along. And the next sort of orientation training was the complaint process, just a review of that for everybody to sort of understand what we have in place. Was it understandable? Are there questions? Okay. Rob.
I guess my question is, I looked at the diagram and stuff like that. In regards to obviously this ongoing facilities use conversation, when folks write a letter to the board, is that sort of same, I guess, diagram followed, or that sort of response each time someone sends a letter? I'm not saying those letters are complaints by any means, but I'm just curious if we have a follow-up procedure for, I guess, non-complaining, reaching out, asking questions.
So all those letters that came to us as a board, I acknowledged and responded in one way or another that it was received and that it would be shared with the rest of the board. And then I put them all into that community letters folder on the drive. So as when I receive, or when a board member, typically what happens, if it goes to one board member, they forward it on to me. They tell the person, hey, I'm just going to share this with the chair. And then they share it with me. And then I respond back that I've received it and provide some information if it's available, or answer if I can, if I have the answer. But I always acknowledge that the letter has gotten to me as the chair. Okay. Oh, Sandy.
Sorry, I'm trying to unmute myself again. Thank you, Don. So, obviously I need to get into the technology and make sure I'm in all these drives, so I'll make sure to figure that out. Do we have a mechanism for how we as a board together address all those community letters that come in? So we can acknowledge them, process them, and ultimately communicate back to our, I guess they're kind of our owners, right? That we've heard them and that there's information going back the other direction. Totally taking my little, course that I just took today seriously. It's not just taking the information in, but how do we as a board, that two-way street, respond to it appropriately as a board. I don't know the mechanism. Like, what do we do with all those letters other than absorb them and listen?
Yes, Krista. I think she has.
Yeah, I was thinking about this also, and I think one thing that I was reminded of is that we set up an FAQ email on our website, and that was a really good way to capture questions, and Jennifer would put them into a table document and then alert Patrick and his team to the fact that there were questions there and there was a process for making sure they were answered. So when we get emails from outside of that, I think, typically if it's everybody, we all can see it and absorb it like you're saying, but typically the board chair responds. But clearly right now, there's lots of information that folks are looking for and have a lot of questions. And so I think it's a good time for us to revisit how we're making sure people are being responded to and getting, beyond just a response, a procedural way for dealing with actual questions. So I was going to mention a little bit later under the communication structure that we remind everybody about that email. I reached out to Jennifer yesterday, I think it was, just to ask her if she'd had any folks sending anything to that email. And she said not for a while. But I think it helps to get us a little more organized, just like we're trying to get more organized with board questions. I think that would really help us to get a little more organized with community questions, so that they can be woven into our process a little more smoothly.
Yeah, a lot of our agenda items today kind of weave together around a lot of different things. I mean, the communication, I could see this more information sharing through the communication structure that we have in place, and just in our conversation right now, we can sort of work a little more on it. Okay.
Dawn, I can wait to the communication part, but do all the board members have the ability to access sort of this spreadsheet, like the email, so that we know what's actually coming in as well, so that we can sort of absorb it as well individually? And then when we do come up with the process, some of the questions I imagine people will want to maybe talk to Patrick about and say, Patrick, it's interesting. This is a common theme in a lot of questions. What do you think? So that we can actually have a dialogue. I don't know what mechanism we have to make sure that we also know the realm of the questions that are being asked by the whole community, which would be wonderful, other than the ones that I just have been getting recently by getting, board emails.
So I'm going to let Krista answer that, because she's a little more, knows more about that particular piece.
Yeah, and it might be worth revisiting again with Jennifer. I think what was happening before, but it's good to be having this conversation again and kind of reboot what we're doing. But what was happening before was that she had a document that she worked from to post onto the website, and that is on the website now. So you can see all the questions that were answered. The first push was right around early December, when Patrick first presented his proposal, and maybe even leading up to and right after that. And so all of those questions and answers are on the website in the facilities planning section. But I think what she did was she had once the questions were answered, she posted it there while it was still a working document where the questions were still waiting to be answered, then that was just shared between Jennifer and the admin team, I think. So there are a couple different places to get that, but maybe we can talk about if that's working and if that makes sense to keep doing it that way. But you should be able to go on and see what's been asked and what's been answered.
And I guess my question in the future is just, can we get a list of what was asked as a board member as opposed to just admin, even if it's not answered? That would be, I think that could be helpful too. That would be great. Is that possible, Patrick? Is that, or something? I know there's, you guys are doing a ton, so, but it sounds like they're still being gathered for sure.
It's not like it was. It was definitely coming in fast and furious, as Krista said, leading up to and right after the recommendation. I think it's something that I think perhaps utilizing those FAQs. The question is, I mean, to be an FAQ, it's a frequently asked question, not a once in a while asked question. So I don't know how we'd gauge what constitutes frequent, but I think continue to utilize a tool like that. And there were actually some board members responding to questions too. So it was a group effort to respond. So I think we could continue on something like what we've been doing, though we'd want to talk about how to do that, given that they're more sporadic now than they were.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Dave.
This is a little off topic. I have news from the State Board Association, and I guess I just assumed it would be on the agenda. I didn't request for an agenda item, but if there's space in the meeting to hear some things from the State Board, I'd be happy to supply information.
Do you mean the Vermont School Boards Association?
Yes.
Okay, so we don't have that on the agenda tonight because this is sort of a special orientation, but we can get it on for we're meeting next week at our regular meeting. So that's where the update would happen normally.
Yeah, we can do that. You know, the legislature's in session and some of this stuff is fairly quickly moving. So if there's an opportunity to do today, that would be helpful.
All right. Any more on the complaint process, understanding it? Okay. Then the last piece was a review of 4.5. And the sort of purpose or the reason I added this was I really wanted to give us an opportunity to find a sense of mutual understanding about what 4.5 outlines. I wanted to have more of a discussion on reflection about 4.5 and to sort of consider some of these questions as we look at this. How do we proceed with this really hard work ahead of us? Remember, we're writing a story for our district. How do we proceed in a way that invites all points of view, is open to questions? And how do we understand what 4.5 says and practice it with each other and with our communities as we continue this work? So that's really sort of the way I wanted to frame a discussion around 4.5 and looking at it. I know we have the interpretation in our monitoring report where we look at all that, so we can look to that to really understand what each thing says. But I really wanted to take this time to together as a group, sort of gain a sense of how are we going to use this to guide us and our work coming up.
And did you want to do, I think this is really important to discuss, did you want to use your process for calling on folks if they have anything to say?
Yes, I was going to for this, and I just wanted to tell Sandy. So we sort of developed a little process to give everybody a chance to be heard. And so I let it go a little freer in the beginning, but when we get down to topics where I really want to be sure everybody's heard from, which is what we're going to be hitting, I have a list of names, and I call through the names and give everybody a chance rather than one person speaking all the time or most of the time, trying to give everybody space to have their own voice be heard. So you'll hear it's the same process or same list we go through it. So I wanted to, let's see, we're going to start with Annie, see if she has anything to add about 4.5 and how we practice it.
I think I'm good for right now.
Okay. How about Sarah LaPearl? I don't know where you went, Sarah.
I'm okay.
You're okay?
Yep.
All right. How about Liz?
I'm okay as well with it. I mean, I appreciate it, and also part of me wonders if we were talking about committees and our conduct and all of these things. A big piece of it does seem to be looking at our policy, and if we could think about the policy governance committee, like maybe some of us becoming experts in our policies. I mean, or the policy that I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know. I just remember sometimes looking over and reviewing and thinking about them in a different way might also be something to consider for us. I like any kind of accountability, peer review, self-review that we could do to make sure we're being productive. So I like those ideas.
Okay. Thank you. Andrew.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, it works. I don't really have anything to add other than I think these things are always helpful to remember that we have lots of policies that if we feel a little ambiguous about how to respond to someone or how we're representing ourselves, that I like to go back and just look at these things to remind myself before I say something. So other than that, I have nothing to add.
Okay. Thank you. Steve.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add on 4.5. I think it pretty much talks for itself. I do agree with Liz's comment. I think it might be helpful to, as an idea, to reinstitute, a policy committee, mainly just to maybe even just as a kind of a bookkeeper for the comments that we seem to get in some of these monitoring reports, and whether we want to consider adding them to an agenda to discuss further. Or I know you're doing it. You have your work done of keeping track of that stuff, but it might be helpful to to assist you with a couple other eyeballs on it and just see if we want to massage anything or bring it up for an agenda item and with some suggestions. So that might be an idea.
Okay. All right, Kevin.
I'm starting to, and it's good to refocus because I'm starting to think more about my constituency than the board, if you will, and a lot of my thinking that, particularly with this big issue with how we deal with facilities and declining enrollments and that sort of thing. And sometimes I rationalize that, thinking that my constituency is sort of in step with where the board needs to go or something, but I don't really know if that's true. But anyway, I've been thinking a lot about that lately. Is we're all here to support the district as a unified body, and sometimes that just gets in the way when you start thinking about subcomponents of that. So I've been struggling with that.
Okay. Dave Sharp.
Yeah, so Kevin's comments resonate. I often go back to my first week or so in the legislature when we were doing training, and the discussion was about a past legislature that was faced with voting on whether they should allow women to vote in the state of Vermont. And the people who elected these representatives to the legislature were all men, and yet here they were faced with the notion that they might be voting against the wishes of the people who put them in office in order to further what they thought was the right path. And a number of legislators, including, I believe, the one from this community, voted to allow women to vote and subsequently lost their seat in the legislature because the men who had put them there didn't agree with that decision and voted them out. So I think that public officials like us are often faced with the dilemma: are we voting just to get reelected, or just what we think the people who are going to support us at the polls think? Or are we trying to do what we think is best for the children in our community, regardless of whether we get reelected or not? And that's a dilemma that I think any public official faces.
Okay, thank you. Rob?
Yeah, as far as just the specific policy, I don't have any concern with the way it's written in the policy itself, but I think the bigger elephant in the room is just this ongoing conversation that has seemed to become more and more divisive between our towns and maybe even between our board members. And I've thought a lot just about my year on the board, which has been on Zoom, and how hard of a year it's been for all of us. And I've had 30 plus years of communicating with other individuals, whether I agree with them or not, but that's usually in person. And so I found Zoom just itself to be a real hindrance to an more open, free, honest discussion. I think it's really important as board members, we do express our opinions, and it's okay that they're different. I think that's really important. And I don't know if it's a factor of Zoom or because this issue is facilities use issue seems to be so sensitive. I just haven't felt like either there's been really good discussion or that there's blanket statements that are made that don't really help the process move forward, and language used that isn't necessarily for the better of all. And so it's hard to sometimes parse apart that individual opinion from language that I think other people interpret as a board member speaking for the board. And I think that's tricky when you're behind a camera in a 2D screen. I think that being said, we can all be better, I think, but it's also important that we try to realize we should maybe sometimes cut ourselves some slack too. I know I haven't operated at my best in any function of life in the past 12 months. But that doesn't mean we can't try harder and try better to just be thoughtful with our word choice. And if we're going to say something, make sure that we have data to support it, to back it up, and not just throw out blanket statements there. I worked in outdoor education for a decade, and a big part of that was, giving feedback to students and other co-instructors in the field after a 30-day, a 49-day expedition. And that process was always really challenging, but really rewarding when done really well. And, if someone gives you good feedback, whether it's it's constructive or something that's reaffirming, I mean, really, there's only two answers that you can have is thank you or I don't understand. And I think the board, we could function better if we, at one point or another during the year, paused and gave ourselves feedback and possibly the opportunity to give other board members feedback. I know, you know, it's a revolving sometimes circle of who's on the board, but you know, to get better, sometimes you have to get feedback from others and be better. And if we don't allow that space, and I don't think this policy necessarily speaks to that, but this question that you're raising on your chair note sheet, I think do speak to that. So it's just something I've been chewing on because I know I have my blind spots, and I would love feedback so I can be better as a board member. And I think this is an opportunity for the board to hear from the public too. And I think we have on how we can be better as a board moving through not only this process, but just normal board work too. So that was long-winded, but I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this. And, you know, all I can say is I'll try to be as thoughtful as possible and better.
Okay, thank you. And Sandy, you're next on the list.
Thanks, Don. So I've been furiously trying to access the website because I know a lot of information is on the MAUSD website and the policies and information. You know, before MAUSD was put into place a couple of years ago, I was on the policy governance committee, and I know we did a lot of hard work to try to figure out how to monitor ourselves, you know, and also to monitor executive limitations. And so I had that in mind. But when I look at 4.5, the first thing that comes to mind for me, and I forget now because it's been a while since I've been on the board, I actually can't answer this question off the top of my head. What have we identified as the ownership? You know, because I was just, again, really good, you know, tutorials that you sent that I was watching from Brown Dog on how important it is. There are a lot of stakeholders that we need to be listening to, but really we take our direction from what we've identified to be the owners. And in terms of hearing from them and then communicating back to them, you know, we're accountable to them, right? But we also have authority for everyone below us to try to achieve that, what we're being responsible for. So I didn't know if you could, because this is sort of orientation, you know, if we could talk about what we've identified as our ownership. I imagine our communities must be that, people who, you know, all the 5-town people who vote, you know, and contribute to making the decisions that ultimately we put out there. I imagine they must be ownership, but I apologize, Don, it's been a while. I just don't remember who that is, because to me, that really then speaks to 4.5 and helps give us direction as a board in our discussions and help us focus on who we're really beholden to, right? And not individually, not necessarily constituents, but all the owners as a whole that we've identified, and how we as a group with our knowledge feel like that we can best reach those goals or the things that they're asking for from us, you know, for our community.
Yep. So I think there's two places, and I see one right now. It's under 4.0, where it talks about on behalf of the citizens of Bristol, Lincoln, Moncton, New Haven, and Starksboro. And then there's another place, and that's the one I'm not sure on where it is, that talks about the voters. So as I remember it through that conversation, it was the citizens the citizen voters of the 5 towns kind of thing. But I'm happy to look back and, you know, see that we're saying the same thing in both spots.
And I guess, I mean, Krista, I imagine you must have thought a lot about this because of all the community engagements I know you've worked so actively on in terms of trying to identify who are the community and how do we take in their information and how do we push it back out. Again, I commend you because I think one of the biggest failings, and I think we identified it as one of our biggest failings as a board, was really trying to figure out how to connect with our ownership. Right. It's the biggest challenge. It's one of the biggest roles we have as a board, especially in policy governance. And I think one of the most difficult things to take in and translate and figure out how do we then govern accordingly. So I just wanted to comment that on 4.5, it just really brings home for me that without knowing more clearly what that also means, just to say to the community, like, what does that mean? It's hard for me to then direct myself in terms of giving a direction for how we look at things and the decisions we make. Just some thought to put out there.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And then, okay, just there's somebody with a mic open. So if everybody would just double check, if you're not talking, would you might mute yourself? Maybe it's a phone. Krista, I'll let you.
Yeah, just to Sandy's point, I think a lot about the linkage to the ownership as our decision making gets more fraught. And it reminds me that it's more and more important to go back to some of those community engagement principles. And I have a whole soapbox to talk about with respect to that a little later in the agenda. But regarding 4.5, the thing I zoned in on was the code of conduct. And I think that it also speaks to kind of where we are at this decision-making point. And, I appreciate a lot of what Rob said. I think we all have some relationship to schools. We all were students, we're all taxpayers, we're all residents of the 5 towns. And so we all do have a vested interest and opinions and emotions and reactions to this whole process. And I don't think it should be expected that we don't have those and that we completely set aside when we sit in these meetings as board members. But I do think that it's really important to be deliberate and mindful about what we say and how we speak. And I think broad generalizations and comparisons can be dangerous. And I do believe that as a whole board, it's the work we do overall that matters most and should be the focus, not the words of individual members at any given time. Maybe we've had a long day, or like Rob's Zoom is just, it's awful for fostering positive dialogue. And, these are challenging times. And so we're all going to, have moments where we're not at our best, but I think we should strive for being as mindful in how we speak as possible, because, that does have an impact. Words do matter and they're important. But I hope that, if we get back to some opportunities for dialogue with the community outside of this really stilted format, like we did in the fall of 2019, then specific words at any given time will maybe matter a little less. And we'll have the chance to connect as people, as humans that all care about students and schools and communities. But in the meantime, I think it's a good reminder that it's just reminding us about what we say and how we say it. And I don't know what our process, I guess I do know that we have different times where we monitor our work as a board. At the end of a meeting we do, and then yearly we do. And so, those are good times maybe for us to use more deliberately to talk about how we think it went and, provide opportunities for feedback. So thanks for bringing this up, Don.
Thank you. All right, Dave, you have your hand up again?
I do. Thank you. So yes, words do matter. And one of the words that just drives me crazy is owners. We're not a corporation. We don't make widgets. The notion of a school board run as a business is ridiculous. And it disenfranchises all the many of our citizens. All of our students are disenfranchised with the notion that our owners are voters. Immigrants who actually have children in our school district, they're they're disenfranchised. So the whole concept of we're running a corporation and we have an ownership is ridiculous, in my view.
Liz?
The robust conversations about ownership, definitely. I think we've had them before and we had them in our training. But I think one thing that we would all agree on is that it's very clear that our beneficiaries are our students. So I just, at least that's very clear. So
It's helpful to remember those positive points. Thank you, Liz. Sandy?
No, I think that's a good point, David. I use the word owner, and why I asked what the definition of owner is, because I think of it as being broader necessarily than what we had listed as just, either voter. That's why I asked the question, because to me, it's a much broader possibility of who we're accountable to. That's why I was seeking that answer. So I think it's a good thing to explore the positive sides as well, but also how, who are we including and how are we, how expansive is it or not? So I'm just using the terms of policy governance. So I totally appreciate terms can mean something, but I also, it depends on how we define it. And if I think as a board, we define it in a way that everyone feels meets our goals for the children, the education, what it brings to the community clearly. I just want to make sure, that's why I brought up that issue of how are we defining it, because to me, that does then also form what we do.
Okay. So anyone else who didn't make a comment, Annie or Sarah LaPearl or any of those earlier ones who didn't have a comment?
Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right. I'll keep moving along then. All right, so now we'll move into a discussion again around those decision-making tools. Included in the packets were the ones that we had already looked at a couple of times. I know in public comment, we heard about another one. So this is really an opportunity, as we talked about, continuing to fine tune what we'll use and having a discussion just about those kind of things right now. So again, I'll start with Annie. Do you have any feedback about the tools that were included or the?
Not right now, I don't know. Maybe at the end, but not right now.
Okay, all right. So how about Sarah LaPearl?
Currently.
Liz?
it makes sense that we use all of the tools and maybe some just apply better to different situations, kind of, but I appreciate the work in putting them all together.
Okay. All right. Andrew.
So my general thought on the tools is I think they're fine. And I think, excuse me, understanding that the tool is not going to be up to everyone's satisfaction, probably either on the board or folks in the community who look at it when they're developing proposals, and just realizing that I think right now we need to go with good enough and that we can tweak things later if we have to, but just for us, not, what's the term? Not letting good be the perfect being the enemy of good, right? So that I think we should feel fairly confident that this is going to be a good assessment tool, and then not spend a lot of time trying to drive it to that last 5 or 10% to make it perfect. This is a really complicated process all the way around. So far, I think we can push ahead with what we've got.
Okay. All right, Steve.
Yeah, I would agree with Andrew. And as far as tools for the community, I mean, Patrick, I know you and maybe you're going to talk about this later, but you and Floyd have been, I believe, working on something similar to what was talked about in public opinion. Do you have any sense of when that you might have that rounded up?
Yeah, it's really close. So Floyd's been working really hard on a financial tool so people can crunch numbers and they can look at average costs per different positions and facilities costs and try to sort of a choose your own adventure kind of tool as people want to put together different options. So that's the financial side. And I'm also working on a sort of compilation of resources so folks can look at some state level resources, some local resources about what are we trying to achieve educationally. So they can kind of marry the educational and academic and social and emotional goals that we have with the costs of operating, and because it's more than just the numbers, right? Like we can crunch numbers in lots of different ways, but we're trying to use resources that we will have available toward some targeted outcomes for students driven by the ends policy. So people really need to ground themselves in both the financial realities and the academic pursuits as they put together proposals. So we're taking it from both angles, and we do. Floyd, I think, is ready to share one tab of a tool that he's working on to give a sense of what we're building, and I can share the super drafty document that I started to kind of pull together. Whether that's now or at a different point, I'll leave that to Don. But yeah, we're in the works, and I think we'll have it ready for the meeting when everyone comes together. And actually, the financial tool, actually both of those things, the intent is to have those linked in the call for proposals, so people know here's sort of a baseline of information for people to begin working from and thinking on. And then when we come together at the workshop or the informational meeting, we can hear more from folks about beyond what was provided, what do you need, or perhaps even more so, spend some time going over those documents with folks so they can understand the tools and how they can be useful.
Sort of to tie into that, and this goes to the letter that was going around talking about getting a little better grip on how you envision your consolidation plan addressing the educational side of things, because that's as you note, that's an important comparison. So I can say from going through your presentations that I have a pretty good sense of what that is, but it sounds like it might need to be a little bit clearer defined and useful for other folks to be able to use as a comparison tool. How does their plan stack up against how you see that working under your proposal?
So I'm wondering if we just can finish hearing from people about the tools that are there, and then give Patrick and Floyd a few minutes to show the drafts they have in process. Okay, so Kevin, we'll just finish up this and then.
So I think these are good for a preliminary evaluation. I'll stubbornly stick to my concept of that I've been pitching, that there's really two levels of thinking here, if you will. A broad base for the proposals and a very finite, more detailed presentation level, if you will, that will get into a lot of the nuts and bolts. The only thing that I struggle with a little bit is the consideration of, what we're commonly trying to roll out or perfect or work on as an MTSS system. I see academic excellence and all this kind of stuff, and in my mind that means make the smart smarter, and it doesn't really encompass what the aspects are to bring along those that are struggling. And if I see anything that I'd like to see stronger in these two tools is exactly that, is more of an emphasis not only in excellence but in how effective the proposal is and bringing along those that struggle. And then when we go to the presentation stage, we would have another whole list of much more detailed questions and expectations, but that's another story at this point.
Okay, thank you. Dave Sharp.
I'm okay.
Okay. Rob.
I agree with Kevin on the first piece, that I think these seem like more like guiding documents for the first round. I also wonder, Patrick, I think you sort of alluded to it, or the way I heard you say it, looking at other outside resources too. Like we're not an island as a district. There could be best practice for this. And I don't know what that is or if that exists, but I assume there probably is in certain regards. Is there a tool that we could plug in our ends, our community values, also that has maybe shown to work in other places? I think that's just my 2 cents. And I don't know if that's on the early end of this process or on the late end that we go to it, but. And then I didn't know if DMG was also maybe thinking about creating some sort of an assessment tool where that would fall in line. To me, it seems like maybe later on down the road, but that's just a question I have also.
Okay, thank you. Sandy.
The one question I had actually is what the last part that Rob said was whether DMG had any suggestions for how to do an assessment tool, since it sounds like they do, like if you ask them from the very beginning how to gather information or at the end. I'm just wondering if their expertise that they have will give us any input as well on what could be useful. I mean, we would still decide what's in it, but just wondering.
Yeah, I think I shared, I don't know if it was the last meeting or the one before, but they do have tools that they've used for, they've helped boards develop tools, really, I think is what it is, to assess various options. Because obviously there's board input that's really critical in developing that. And I think this may go to Kevin's point, there's sort of the initial review to see, does it pass the initial test? And then there's the more in-depth review for those proposals that have warranted deeper analysis. My sense is this board probably doesn't want to pay DMG to analyze every single proposal that comes from every single community member that puts it forward. The cost on that could be astronomical. We don't really know what we're going to get for a proposal, so it's hard to know. But I think an initial review by the board to determine on what proposals do we want to invest the funds through DMG to analyze, and through that process, work with the board to develop a more in-depth tool for their review.
Okay. All right. And then Krista.
Yeah, just building on what Sandy and Rob was saying, I think I'm more interested in DMG helping us to develop a metric than I am for them coming up with more options. I feel like there can't be very many more options than we already have out in the universe. I also know that we really need their help with the community engagement piece. I think what's most interesting to me is having a third party help us, because this isn't my area of expertise. How do we look objectively at all of the different parts and pieces of this problem, this puzzle, and help us to be better at evaluating them. And so I feel a little muddled with the tools we have right now, because I feel like they don't really scratch the surface of what I think we're going to want to know. They're a really good start. And I guess maybe this is sort of what Kevin was saying too. And the values are key. But there's many more layers that we want to look at. And I just don't know, I'd like to hear, Patrick, what you and Floyd have been working on. I'd like to be able to see that and look at it more closely beyond just this evening, and really be able to get a sense of, is that everything I would want to know? Can we come back to that before we decide that's the metric? Could we filter that with anything DMG might offer? The other thing I wanted to say is that I don't know where this fits in the process, but I'm going to reiterate again that to me it is hugely important that when we get to evaluation, that we find a way to do it collectively with board and community members, some students and some staff. And, at the end of the day, maybe those recommendations come back to the board to make the ultimate decision. And I'm really invested in ways to make this be a community problem solving or community grappling versus folks out in the community trying hard to figure out what it is we want and hoping they get it right and feeling like maybe we're not going to listen either way. I don't want to set us up for that. I think that's not a good plan. So I don't know where in the process we reevaluate just the kind of ultimately how we select proposals.
Krista, this is Louis DuPont. He's unmuted, Dawn. I don't know if you as the host, if you could mute himself, because it's totally interrupting your feeds, Krista, and I want to hear what you have to say for sure.
Yeah, I don't have the power. I don't know if somebody else has it.
Nate Richardson, mute yourself.
All right, and there's also Louis DuPont.
Yes,
Louis, you need to mute yourself, please.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thank you.
Hi, Louis.
Hi.
The last thing I wanted to say is that
so can you just hang on a minute?
Oh yeah.
Sorry, I'm only getting every third word and I want to hear it too.
Louis, you're still there. We can still hear you.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to.
There. Great.
There
Thank you. Okay, Krista.
No, I just also, I don't know where to ask about what's happening with the principals and what they're working on. And that was mentioned at the last meeting by Nancy, and that was total surprise to me. So I'd love to hear more about that. That probably doesn't fit into the decision-making tools, but I guess it just, yeah, I feel like we need more information before we decide how we're going to evaluate proposals. And maybe that's okay. We can bring people together. We can, I know folks that are putting proposals together probably really want to know, what do you want? But I really want to hear from Floyd and Patrick and the DMG before we know what it should look like. And so I'm not sure where that leaves us, but I don't think we're there yet.
Thank you, Krista. Okay. Now I lost Patrick and Floyd. Where did they go? All right. There's Patrick. Okay, Patrick, let you start.
Yeah, sure. All right. So I kind of laid the groundwork for this already. So Floyd, I'll turn it over to you to share the tab that we were looking at earlier today, and then I'll share my screen after Floyd and just show you the sort of very simple list of some of the resources that I think will be useful to folks. So take it away, Floyd. And don't forget to unmute in case you're still muted and talking. I can't quite see you.
Thank you. I'm hoping you can see a big spreadsheet. Get somebody to give me a thumbs up. Got it. All right. It's fairly familiar to the board members. We've used this in the past kind of for our budget building structure. And if you look kind of dead center, fiscal year 22 is highlighted in yellow. And that's the budget that the board just approved. Going down through top line expenditures, expected revenue, education spending, an equalized pupil, which drives the spending per pupil, down to how that affects the tax rate. Can you see my cursor? Thank you. So that 212,760 is the projected threshold that we're in good standing with. You can see we've got numbers that go all the way out to 31. And we've used a 4.26% increase in our annual expenditure. And I'll get to how we arrived at that in just a minute. And it reflects keeping all of the programs that we currently have in place, all of the facilities we currently have in place, all of the spending items that we use, and raising those costs based on the budget drivers, which salaries, medical insurance, facilities upkeep, equalized pupils, all of those are the items that drive those costs. All right, so you can see here, those projections in red are where we're expecting to head if we have the declining enrollment as projected by our internal numbers and as projected by the NASDAQ study, as well as some of the other items around the state that we've used, state studies that are showing declining population. Drives this number, which goes from a $212 to the good on the threshold to, in fiscal year 30, $12 million underneath, meaning that we're upside down by $12 million. All right, so that's the jumping off point of what we're looking at internally. Out here are the items that we want to use forward facing with our community to be able to drive their own bus. You know, what numbers do you believe, or what numbers do you have that are different than ours to impact? So if we come up high, budget increase drivers, we have salary, which includes Social Security, unemployment, workman's comp. We're projecting a 3.377 increase over the life of this projection. We're anticipating a 13.5% annual increase in medical insurance. That's reflective of our history. And then a 2% just in normal costs going up for all of those other items that aren't salary in our budget. As those numbers impact each of the percentages, meaning taking 75% of our budget, which is the reflective number of salary costs, and increasing it by that 3.3, it rolls out to this 4.26 number out here. All of these items that are in yellow are areas that can be manipulated by whoever has this spreadsheet to drive the numbers here reflective of what those assumptions are. So I'm gonna come in here on salaries, and if we look at this 0.03377 and how it drives out this number, if we said, for example, 0% increase in salaries over the course of the next 10 years, we're still $4.5 million upside down in year 30 on the spending. Keeping everybody we have, but no increase. So let's put that back. Let's go with projected threshold down here. We're assuming a 2.5% increase in the annual state spending threshold. If there's a belief that it's going to increase, that the state's going to look at it and go to a 4.5, how does that impact us? It impacts hugely. we've gone from 12 million to 7 million over the threshold. Sorry. Back to 2.5. We had some great news today. Dave may have been hinting about it. We're hearing that the capital expense exclusion may be added or is being added to the yield bill, which means it has a pretty good opportunity to continue forward. So if we take our $1.1 million, sorry, bear with me, and we look at what does that do for us, gosh, stay with me. It immediately impacts how much we're off on that spending threshold. Equalized pupil, using the NASDAQ study, plugging that into the formula that we currently use based on the average daily membership and what that drives for an equalized pupil number. The projection in 2030 is that we will be at 1228, about 200 less than we have now. Well, there's certainly an argument to be made that we're seeing people moving into Vermont. We're hearing that argument. We're not quite seeing it yet in practice. But let's say we move to 1465.71 of projected equalized pupil back in 30, so that here we've built ourselves to the same number we've had here, because we expect that people are moving in. That doesn't mean they're moving immediately into our schools. There may be younger kids, younger families, but it certainly slows the decrease and then comes back up. So assuming we don't lose any equalized pupil, we're only $6.7 million upside down. We haven't talked about the weighting study at all. There's nothing, this little area here is about the weighting study. And there's three different options we've built into this. One is it hits all at once. And for conversation purposes, we drove this with a impact in the year fiscal 24, just because there's certainly a conversation happening to delay the impact of that a little bit. So if we can look at it in a number of different ways. This would be if it hits all in 1 year, if it hits over a couple of year phase in, and let's say they use an 8-year weighting study roll in so that it's the least impact. Each of those will have a different impact with how it affects where we sit versus the spending threshold and our equalized pupil and our ed spending. So for example, let's look at, it's a 2-year phase in, and our estimates based on the middle of the road of the weighting study show us with a 7.7% impact to our equalized pupil. So if I bring that in and we spread it over 2 years, it moves us to 14 million upside down in the 30th year. If we leave that at 0, it impacted over 8 years, then the same 14 in the 30th year, but it slides in a little gently as it goes through. This is kind of, so I've spent more time than I wanted, and probably more time than you would like. Patrick and I, we joke about wonk versus weeds. I'm often in the weeds, but really I'm wonky. What this does in a nutshell is give anyone who wants to work with our projections for what do we have to work with, the ability to manipulate it in a way that allows them to generate a number that reflects what their data shows. And this reflects what our data shows. To give you a sense of what we need for an equalized pupil to get to a break even in year 30, we're looking at 1,759 gives us only $385.30 to $3,855 under the threshold. So in that example, if we keep all of the staff we currently have at the increases that we've been negotiating with from a collective bargaining standpoint, with the historical increase of medical insurance, with a 2% increase in the other costs, this scenario of 1759 of equalized pupil brings us close to the break even. That's pretty close to 300 more students by fiscal year 30. So you can use this in a number of different ways. We're looking at it as a jumping off point to look for direction from you all on how we can do this better. I'll be quiet. Let Patrick spend a minute. If you had anything to add?
No, I think that's a good overview. Just trying to kind of lay it out there and make it relatively easily manipulated. As you can see, there's some work and support we would need to do to really help someone utilize this tool well. But I think before I share what I've done, maybe we'll leave this up and give you a chance to answer any questions, Floyd.
So I can see Rob has his hand up. Oh.
Yeah, I don't know if I was first, but since you continue, question Floyd, is there an opportunity to, the revenue's flat for a decade? Is there a chance to sort of manipulate that number? Did I miss that somewhere? And,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just if that's possible.
It's not in this example. And I did that purposefully because if we're manipulating revenue, typically that's going to manipulate an offsetting expense, but we certainly could do that in the same way that it's just formulaic. I can put in anything in there that would allow for us to manipulate revenue just as easily.
And then my other follow up is, thank you for all this work. It'd be really great to see, I guess, the proposal numbers, Patrick's proposal numbers plugged into this as an example to help maybe folks sort of understand how the tool works or to extrapolate a little bit more too. I know you kept basically the numbers across the top, like sort of as is, but the proposals aren't going to hold things as is. And so I didn't know if there could be an example of what that looks like when it's not as is.
Sure. So if for an example, we wanted to reduce salaries by 10%, let's put a -10 in this, and you can see the numbers at a 10% annual drop will be, sorry, let's go here, will be pretty flat on our expenditures. And that's reflective of taking 10% of our teammates out of the equation going forward.
Okay, I see Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Floyd and Patrick, for putting this together. This is a great starting point. I do think, as people think about how their plan might evolve, being able to manipulate the revenue and the numbers of staff, maybe use an average cost per staff member to factor in, and then it's missing anything with regard to the special ed rollout. And I sort of think in my mind, first of all, I think the weighting study numbers that have been analyzed by JFO and the legislature are wrong with regard to the poverty in our community. And I think that there's going to be some effort to get better numbers there. But I also think of the special ed rollout as being positive for our district. So I don't know if it's possible to put, if we're going to manipulate weighting rollout, to manipulate also special ed rollout. But I think it's critical to have revenues be changed and the number of staff to be changed in some way as a part of this proposal or this spreadsheet. Thank you.
Okay, and then Andrew.
So great job, Floyd and Patrick. Love the spreadsheet. I love spreadsheets anyway, so I think this is great. And I think also helps people understand the complexity of the system. One of the things that we've been talking about, obviously, is repurposing schools and then ultimately whether we should close the school and ask the taxpayer for that. So I'm wondering if that's one additional variable that we should have in the calculator is I remember it was like $1.25 to $1.75 million per school closure that Patrick had presented, I think, more than a year and a half ago. I think that may have included salaries, but I wonder if it was possible to put in like, this is what it costs to operate the school if it was standing empty and we were cleaning it, cleaning the bathrooms, stocking paper, heating the place, running the electric. If that variable could be in there just for people to understand how much that is or is not a cost driver.
You might have heard me reference this tab a couple of times. This is part of a larger document that's still in draft form. And this tab seemed the most important one to give a sense of the kind of tool we're working to create. But there's a tab that we're working on that shows the average cost of different positions. There's a tab that talks about facilities. There's a tab that talks about costs associated with central office services. And
okay, great.
Okay, great. And then Steve, and then Krista.
Just a simple question, Floyd. Underneath the, or right above the weighting study, there's a field that looks a little odd format-wise. Is that just work in progress, or?
We used, this is reflective to the fiscal year 23 equalized pupil. We used this 1429 based on the actual fiscal year 22 ADMs and the fiscal 23 recapturing 70% of all of those that were out homeschooled returning back to our district in a full-time, which gives us a little bit better number here than if we only used the ADMs that are reflective of what we had for average daily membership.
And just to clarify that a little bit, it's not 70% of all students who were enrolled in home study programs. It's 70%. It's recapturing 70% of the students who were who this year are in their first year ever of home study. We have several students that have been in home study programs for a while. We're not expecting that we recapture a high percentage of those folks, but we do anticipate, and it's an assumption for sure, that a number of the folks that entered into a home study program for the first time this year did so in response to COVID, and hopefully next year we're in better shape, and hopefully most of those students return to our schools.
Okay, I just, the cell wasn't reading and I couldn't quite make out what it was, so.
A little cut and paste issue, Steve. Thank you. Thanks for helping me fix it.
And
it's good that I figured that out because that was actually interesting to hear. So.
Okay, Krista.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for this work. Not like Andrew, I do not like spreadsheets very much. So my question is more process. I'm just wondering, hearing some suggestions that other folks have made about things to add or to consider, what's the best way for us to, and it sounds like there's also other layers that are in here that are still being worked on. And I know that the idea is to have this workshop for the community next Wednesday, I guess. And so I'm just wondering how we make suggestions of other things. Where's our place for input into this so that it's a tool that we feel is really useful to what we want to know.
I think it reflects from my standpoint, I'd prefer the board to come together and to have, we'd like to see this and this and this, as opposed to the 64 variations that that individual board members might like to see. It's cumbersome enough as it is, and can only get more so with the more layers we try and bring in. Having said that, I think the better and deeper and broader we can develop this, the better the tool it will be for our community to be able to put proposals together, which then makes the board's job that much easier on the back end to be able to compare and contrast. And I like this piece of this one. That's as Patrick and I are putting this together, that's our goal, is how does this tool become a mechanism to support the board to make better decisions? So I'm open to whatever direction the board gives Patrick, and Patrick, saunters over and gives me the direction. We'll build a spreadsheet that gets to what the board needs to make the best decision for our community.
And I guess the audience, when I was thinking about this, and as I've been working with Floyd on it, in my mind, the audience has always been with this tool. I'm a community member who wants to put forth a proposal, and I need a tool that's going to help me crunch the numbers based on my proposal. So I've been thinking about it from that lens, not so much the lens of how can this tool be used by the board to identify what they want. And I feel like knowing the audience may drive different tools. And maybe there's a way to merge the two into this one tool. But the thinking was a starting point for the community members who are interested in putting together a proposal, and then gathering from community members, perhaps ahead of time, but at the very least at this informational meeting. Some of the informational meeting is us providing more information and helping folks understand the tools, et cetera. But a lot of it is, as you've had time to think about it and you've played around with the tool, what questions do you have? What more information do you need beyond what we've given to work on your proposal? And so that's where, to me, hearing from the community members what else they need, we can either adjust the tool based on that feedback or provide additional resources to help support whatever direction someone might be going in.
Okay, that's helpful clarification. And maybe if we could revisit on our board agenda, revisit this as we think about evaluating proposals, that would be good too. So we can take a little more time to think about it.
All right, I still see Steve's hand up and Dave's. Is that from before? You've changed positions, so I can't tell if it's a new hand or an old hand.
Sorry,
Yes,
Donna.
that's from before.
Okay. All right, so I guess Patrick, then you're going to give us a sample, a little peek at your sample.
Yeah, it's still very drafty, and it's really just a list of bullets and resources. I'll let Floyd stop sharing. I can pull up the sort of list of resources that I have going so far. Somewhere, Floyd, on one of your screens, you're going to see a little red stop share at the top. It may be, if you have 3 screens going, it may be the one you haven't needed yet.
All right. And I'm not seeing it yet. There it is.
There we go.
Thank you.
Nicely done. Floyd's first screen share. Nailed it. Way to go. All right. So these are sort of a list of resources that I think are important for people to access as they're wrapping their head around the educational side of a recommendation. And so we have the strategic plan, of course, and these are all active links. I have to link the NESDEC study still. And I'm still really thinking about if there are additional resources, and feedback on this is great right now. But of course, the strategic plan that we spent 3 years developing, and that included 50 members of our community, board, students, as well as faculty and staff and administrators. Like, it was a very well-represented group of folks that contributed to the creation of that. That's clearly an important part of this. The ENDS policy, which is really the strategic plan, is a plan to achieve the outcomes expressed in the ENDS policy that the board holds me accountable to achieving. A critical piece of information. The DMG and the work they've done around the state, talking about ways in which systems can improve outcomes for struggling learners. The report and the PowerPoint kind of are in tandem. It's similar information, really the same information. Some think the PowerPoint's a little more digestible, so I give that as a couple of different options for understanding that. The Vermont Education Quality Standards, I think, are important. I tried to help by suggesting some pages to refer to that rather than read the entire document. Obviously, the link's there, everyone can read the whole document, but trying to direct people to portions of that to wrap their head around. This isn't the most recent ENDS monitoring report because it was so much more of a means report, but to go back to the prior actual ENDS monitoring report and take a look at our student data. That has to be part of this conversation, right? If we are truly focused on improving outcomes for our students, folks need to understand what are the outcomes for our students now and the motivation behind a push to improve those outcomes. Of course, the community values. This is a list of the prioritized community values. This kind of mirrors the tool that you looked at as a draft tonight. And this is prioritized according to the analysis of the survey results that Rob and Krista gave several weeks ago now. The Vermont MTSS Field Guide digs deep into the work we're trying to do in building our multi-tiered system of supports. I think it's important for folks that are putting together a proposal to understand that system that is so critical to being able to meet the needs of students, all students, including those who struggle, but not exclusively those who struggle. And then linking the NSDEC study, which obviously has the demographic study, the enrollment projections, and has their initial thoughts on possible options, was another resource that I think folks should be looking at as they're considering a recommendation. So this is the attempt to provide the educational resources to know toward what end do we need to manipulate the numbers in terms of what we're striving to achieve as an organization. We are not striving to achieve numbers. We're striving to achieve outcomes. And this helps articulate ways in which we might get to those and what those outcomes might be. And obviously it needs a lot of work. I need to work on an intro, like it needs a lot of work, but in terms of the kinds of resources that I think we ought to make available, I think these are at least a really good starting point.
I'm not seeing any hands, but then again, I can only see five. Oh, there I just saw one. Kevin.
So I understand the basis of the Pickett's report is cost or cost understanding, but there's some tremendous information in there as far as setting up a structure to understand that cost. And I don't know if you could get around the cost aspect of it, if you could see some benefit to pulling information from that report or not.
Yeah, I definitely think there are benefits. Yeah, it's a super weighty report, but I think maybe looking at it again and trying to help people out and focusing in on certain sections, and again, making the whole report available, but trying to help guide the process a little bit and be respectful of everyone's time. That may be another approach to that.
And then Steve Rooney.
So this is just a comment going back to what I mentioned earlier. I mean, having your current plan's educational approach outlined and how it fits in with these sources would give folks a target to strive to do better than. I mean, that's what we're looking for. How are we going to? We're not looking for a solution that's as good as yours and does exactly what you're doing with facilities. We're looking for if there are alternatives to what you suggested that are going to provide equal educational outcomes. So having that in a concise location would give folks a good benchmark to try to achieve.
Yeah, I certainly, I see the value in that. Just thinking about how to articulate that, but in whatever attempt I can make to articulate that, I think will be valuable. It also has me thinking about, another potential resource, definitely a different kind of investment in time. And maybe this is something that is more for the board than the community. I don't know. We are engaged so our administrative team is engaged in a book study right now. I don't know if this is going to be reversed for you, but it's the 6 shifts to improve special education and other interventions. It's really, it speaks to so much about our multi-tiered system of supports. It's actually authored by Nate Levinson, who is the DMG person that I've been communicating with, that we are talking about using as a consultant. It touches on so much of the work we've done to build our systems that are reflected in these documents, and highlights some areas where we have room for growth still. But it does it in a super straightforward, practical manner that I think ties so many things together in ways that would take a different level of work and expertise and analysis to tie a lot of these other documents together. So I'm actually thinking about, if the board was interested, we'd be happy to get copies of this that I think would really, really resonate and help offer some clarity of where we are, where we've come, and where we need to go as we think about the educational piece of this. So again, I can link it as a resource here. Folks can pursue it on their own. It's a relatively quick read, but again, I think super informative.
Krista.
Thanks, Patrick. What is the link to the strategic plan? And is it to the really broad brochure version of the strategic plan, or does it drill down at all into, okay.
Is it to the website?
Yeah.
The actual.
So I guess, and I know I've mentioned this to you, I think outside of board meetings before, about, if there's a way to drill down into that more, and I think this would be helpful for folks shaping proposals, and definitely helpful for the board as we evaluate outcomes at the end of every year. There's so much that goes into rolling this out, both, from what's achievable based on our staff and resources, from how we as a district actually define things like social and emotional learning and equity. It's been great to hear presentations from some of the team leaders on the goals of the strategic plan for a given year and how that's broken out. And it just kind of puts some meat onto the bones of what's a really aspirational document that's hard to, it could be translated in lots of different ways. And, I know we talked about what that could look like, but even as sort of a summary of what's happened so far and where teams are thinking of going in the next year or two might be helpful, because it has been really well thought out. And there's a lot of really good info in the detail that I think would be great for community and board to know more about.
Yeah, and I think we scratched the surface of it with the last sort of ends monitoring report. That was really a means monitoring report. But as a member of the strategic plan oversight team last year, Krista and Liz, I think as well, you got a chance to get a pretty deep dive into the work that was happening around the strategic plan. And there has definitely been more that has happened, not as much as we'd like due to just responding to the COVID needs. But yeah, we could definitely talk about kind of going back to where we were last year as a starting point and building up to where we are now, and sharing some of the conversations that we're having about where do we go from here. That will be.
Yeah, that's a lot to ask for
hours.
between now and next Tuesday. I get that.
Yep.
I'm just thinking about some of the conversations that have surfaced about, well, how do you define equity and how do you define social and emotional learning? And, you know, I think that what that looks like on the ground it is so valuable to know more about. And it ties a lot to our resources, you know, what we want to do, what we're not able to do. Yeah.
I think I see Kevin's hand.
Kevin. Okay, Kevin. I just found him.
I would take Krista's comment and even make them more broad. And, you know, Floyd's got the easy job. All he's got, it's all numbers, you know, you can't, or I guess you figures lie and liars figure or something or other. But with this here, it's so subjective, and how do you get across, or how do you assure there is an understanding of the direction that needs to happen to make this part work?
That's the really hard part, right? You know, I'm a member of our leadership team. Change in the dynamic of leadership team, whether that's superintendent or a couple of other members, might change the dynamic of what the focus areas are. Like it is so subjective, because you could pick any number of things to focus on. That's where, to me, leaning on the ends policy and the strategic plan are pretty critical, because the work that happened to develop those extends way beyond any individual or any small group of people. That was work, and this is true as I understand it of the ends policy as well. I think there was a very intentional and inclusive, I'm sure iterative process that spanned many months to create the ends policy that we have. And that same process was used to develop our strategic plan. So to point people to those two documents seems really critical to me, because that's not just my thinking, that's not just the admin team's thinking, that is the will of our community. And, you know, we talked about ownership before, and I know Dave doesn't love that idea. My recollection of ownership conversation from this board months ago was the residents of the 5 towns, which I think includes a lot of the folks that he felt perhaps might be disenfranchised. From my perspective, to the extent that we possibly could, these two documents reflect the will of the ownership. And when I say ownership, I'm thinking the residents of the 5 towns, because that includes students, staff, community members, board members. It includes a wide range.
So I guess so I can maybe spit it back out and get some grasp of it. When you talked about changes that administration changes directions and whatnot, that could be very well the individual proposers doing that. But then again, the real check is going to be those two head documents.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
Even how to enact those two documents, right? So as a leadership team, there are 10 of us on our leadership team right now, building principals, assistant principals, Katrina, Susan, and I. We have lots of conversation and debate about, I think we should do this, or I think we should do that, or that should be our approach, or we need to strengthen this area, all while working within the ends policy and the strategic plan. So there's a great deal of subjectivity, and that's where it's sort of the art and the science of educational leadership, and knowing what our North Star is, being the strategic plan and the ends policy, digging into the research about what resources are out there that suggest A, B, or C are the approaches we should take. And we deliberate and we deliberate, and we don't always have, I would say we almost always have consensus. It's not almost always unanimous. A lot of varying thinking, which I think is really important and healthy. And at the end of the day, we have to pick something, and we have to go with something in our efforts to improve outcomes. And yeah, could someone pick a different course of action to improve outcomes? Sure could. We've picked a direction as a team through lots of conversations and deliberations. And it's important to engage in that work and follow that path with fidelity to see if that's going to work. Because we can change paths 3 times a year in how we want to get where we want to be. And we'll always be starting something new and different, and probably not ever get anywhere in our pursuit. I think it's really important to spend the time to write the plan and pick our path, and then work the plan. I think about Val, she's always said it around the board work plan, but plan the work and work the plan. And I feel like that's what we're trying to do related to these documents that you see here that are key resources for the work that we're engaged in and the systems that we built, which again, I think is tied nicely in a bow in many, many ways in this book that we're doing a book study on right now.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more hands, Patrick.
Right.
Oh, wait, Sandy Lee.
Sorry, I couldn't get to the actual raise hand on the Zoom fast enough. And again, I'm at a disadvantage because I haven't been at meetings, obviously, for the last year, just coming onto the board. And I imagine the work that you do with your leadership team must be very rich with information. And, you know, as a board member, it's hard for me because I don't get to hear it. Like, you know, I don't get to hear all that amazing work that I know you guys are processing, coming to consensus, taking things into consideration. And I feel like if I don't have access to that information, then I'm kind of working in a vacuum. Like, I hear what you're saying, but I actually don't have the substance of it. I don't have a true understanding of what it is that you're grappling at an education level. And here we are as a board, and we have all this responsibility and, you know, accountability, you know, to the community. And I just feel like somehow I need more, like a better understanding. And I can go read something else, but I'm just an individual board member who doesn't have the vast amount of experience that you guys have as educators, and which I imagine is an amazing leadership team. You know, I have a lot of faith in the work that you do, you know, as educators, but I feel without the ability to really help give even you guidance from this side, without understanding really the work that you guys are doing on your side. And I don't know how I don't know if that is something that's been shared, but it would just like when we heard that we might hear something from principals. Gosh, I would love to hear the voices of teachers in a productive way, where they also didn't feel like that they were running up against, you know, any conflicts, but at the same time, they're an amazing resource. And I don't know how to hear from them, and maybe that process that we're going forward, we will be able to do that. But I do want to hear all those different views, and I have a lot of faith that this board will think very carefully with careful guidance, and won't just take one side or another, but we'll gather all of it together, get a better understanding of what's happening.
Yeah, I definitely see the value in that. To me, the struggle is how to deliver, right? I think we have to be realistic about the depth of understanding board members can have, right? So we're talking about, if we think about the leadership team, that's a group of 10 people, all with advanced degrees in the field of education, that spend 50 to 60 hours a week devoted to that work.
Right.
You can't replicate that as an individual board member or as a board. So,
but maybe we could hear from them. like in a way where, I mean, I'd like to hear from them. I mean, I want to hear that rich source of information. And kind of like, I don't, I totally don't want to be interfering with your need to be running the school. I totally appreciate the fact that there's a lot of moving pieces that need to be moving forward and trying to get a plan together. But I really feel it's important for all of us to hear in a manner, and I would love to hear suggestions from you on what would be a productive way for us to hear these things. But I do think we need to hear them and all the different ideas, putting aside, any particular agenda, but just trying to, what are the challenges in the community, that each of the different schools have identified. So we have a better understanding of each of our 5 communities that we're responsible for currently with each of the schools, because they aren't all the same, right? And to keep in mind, I think some people know more about other schools than others, but I feel responsible for every one of those schools: Moncton, Starksboro, all of them, Beeman, Bristol, Lincoln, and I know so very little about them, and I feel at a disadvantage. And yet we have to make these really important decisions. So I just put that out there, and I haven't thought of anything in particular, Patrick. And I agree with you. I would love a way to be able to hear, just like we hear your input and your, educational piece. I value those principals as well, being in those buildings, and would love to hear from them.
Yeah, it's tricky. And I think I agree. They are intelligent, thoughtful people, and they would share great information that and different perspectives. Completely agree.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when I think about any organization, we're talking about education, but any organization, at the leadership level, and you can define that in a lot of different ways, there's a need for leaders to do work in confidence, share conflicting thoughts, challenge each other's thinking, kind of hash it out,
Mm-hmm.
and work through that process to make some decisions and set a path without necessarily having all of that conversation out in front for everyone to pick apart and take us off of a path. Hard to know if the path we're on is the right path. I happen to think it is. The proof will be in the pudding in terms of student outcomes, right? But being on a path is critical. Getting off of a path is detrimental. And that's the only concern. So I don't know, I just sort of share that, and I don't even know what to think of it, but I want to respect the process that is so important, and the integrity of the work that we do that is so important to produce the kind of durable, hopefully outcome-driven decisions that we make as a leadership team.
Sure. I definitely want to respect that process. I mean, in the attorney world, we call it kind of work product, when you're really thinking things out and you come to sort of a decision on how you want to move forward. And I'd want to respect, each administrator, principals, sort of all the different ideas they have, but still get some kind of, we need some input. I mean, just as a board, I feel like, honestly, it does a disservice for you, Patrick, because I think it's too difficult for you to try to explain what comes from each of these administrators all on your own. It shouldn't just be you, filtering it as best you can. We should have a system set up in this process where we're hearing, from them. And it also brings me back to the MAUSD unified district issue. When we were a high school, I kind of got it, right? I always trusted that the town school boards, were going to handle some of the issues that were more immediate for their own schools. And so I wasn't as concerned because we were just middle school and high school. And I always thought that the biggest challenge for this board when it became unified with the elementary level and high school was how do we as board members fully represent the differing types of education that's provided, and, at that level by town and in the high school, because to me, they were very, very different. And so again, I don't know. I definitely thought that when this board came together, that was going to be one of the biggest challenges on how to incorporate that in this now one huge, board. And so I'm hopeful that we have that kind of input. I know we don't have any councils. You know how the articles indicated we were going to have maybe councils for each community who could help contribute to the board. I know that I don't see anything that happened, but I know that was definitely a big part of Act 46 was to make sure that each town had some sort of voice and connection in the board level, because it's very difficult to do just at sort of the unified level. I'll stop talking. Thanks, Patrick, for listening. I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate the thinking. And I think, and this is a genuine question, I think part of what the board needs to think about is it more important to the board to hear the collective work of the leadership team or to hear from individual principals?
I don't mind starting with the collective. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm looking forward to the collective work of the team. And it sounds like that's something that I'm excited to hear that you've been working on. So, anything that we can hear, at least to start, and then go from there. Because I don't even know what I'm going to get. So I'm kind of excited to hear. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, Krista?
I realize that I have something to say, but I also recognize that we got off of our turn taking process. So if you want to take a minute and check in with anybody else before I speak, that's fine with me.
Okay, I'll just check in. How about with Annie, or do you have anything you wanted to add?
I'm good. Thanks.
And Sarah LaPearl, you've been very quiet.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else, Liz? You good? Okay. How about Rob?
I'm good, but I echo, I think what Sandy said. I think still being new to the Lincoln, I don't necessarily have a great grasp of LCS, not being a parent of a student in the school system. And I know historically that we've had our meetings in the different elementary schools, but just have a better sense of our entire 5-town community. It's good to hear from different members of the different communities too. And if this is one lens, possibly hearing from, individual teachers from a building or a principal, that just would make me have a better understanding of our school district. And I hope that we can get back to normal at some point and have meetings in the different schools, because there's 3 elementary schools that I have not been in. And, it's hard to grapple with big conversations that we're having when I actually don't have the on the ground understanding of what that school even looks like.
And perhaps another lens to think of this through, I think a lot of what you were talking about, Sandy, and supported by Rob, is I think what you're talking about is a direct inspection. If we think about it in policy governance terms, so it's worth thinking through, what does that mean? What does it look like? What are the implications? And looking at it from that lens. Because I think anytime, in particular, if the board is dissatisfied with the information provided by the superintendent, who's their one and only employee, then they're seeking information from an employee of the superintendent. That's kind of going, it's not really going around, but it's going beyond the superintendent to the superintendent's folks that are direct reports. That starts to be direct inspection. And that's different than if the board charges me, I think, with bring us this information. And if I need to tap into resources to bring that information to you, much like we did with the most recent ends monitoring report, sort of if it's driven by me, that's me tapping into resources to provide information requested by the board, versus the board saying, yeah, we've heard what you have to say, but we're directing you to have your subordinates come directly to us with information. And that's absolutely allowable. And there's a process for it. And that I think helps the conversation a bit, if that's something the board wants to do.
Okay,
I'll look more closely at that in policy governance, Patrick. It's been a while, but I do remember that a bit. So I'll look at that more closely. Thank you.
okay, Krista, and I just want to remind everybody, it's about 8:10, so I want to sort of get us back on the agenda topic. So Krista, go ahead.
This relates. I think this is a really important conversation, and to me, it relates to. Sorry, I'm just looking at the agenda. To what I was going to say around board communication structure. So, if I could just take a moment to do that. So Don had shared an article with me called "What's Trust Got to Do with It," and it was summarized a study by Public Agenda where they looked at chronically failing schools and primarily under-resourced inner cities, and working with these communities to grapple what it might mean to close some of those schools, or to make significant leadership changes, or in other ways to figure out how to solve that problem. And it talks a lot about the best ways to engage with the community around that really hard issue of potentially closing a school. And so I think there's some relevance from that study to this work. And I was really glad to read the article because it just reinforced what I've been feeling for a while now, which is that we've lost our way in terms of the community engagement piece. And I think what Sandy is speaking to kind of gets us back to that in a way. In the fall of 2019, we did some really great work reaching out to specific groups of people. And I remember, Patrick, that you had some reticence and concern about what that might look like. But I think the end result was really positive and really powerful and built a lot of goodwill and trust. And the number one principle that this article by Public Agenda points to in terms of communications and engagement 101 is to lay the groundwork by talking to students, teachers, parents, and community leaders early and often. So I think we did it early and we haven't done it often. And I think we need to get back to that. Board meetings, they're not great places to have that kind of dialogue. And I think there are ways to connect with folks doing the work that don't supersede your work, Patrick, or our management of your work. And I don't think it's a sign of our dissatisfaction with you at all. I think it's our desire to have more evidence and look under the hood a little bit more. And it also just keeps building that trust and that goodwill. I really feel like it's worth the time to do that, as we're also doing this other work of looking at facts and figures and spreadsheets. And I'm more partial to that work because it's more at my alley. But I wanted to ask the board to allow me to reconvene the Community Engagement Committee, because I think that bringing those folks together to talk through, and Patrick and Don, you've always been a part of those committees, and we've had great advice from Susan McCormick, to talk through in a mindful way how we can get back to broadening the scope of information and input we're getting, while we're also seeking proposals. I feel like if we don't do this, we're going to continue to be in this us versus them place. It's just inevitable. And so I really hope that that we can do that work. I think it's really important. The other thing the Community Engagement Committee did well was to help manage the PR, the communication piece. That's also kind of gotten away from us since that group hasn't been meeting, but we had some folks that really helped us to try to figure out, and which all had a time outside of the board meetings to all get on the same page with communication going in and out. So that's the soapbox that I referred to wanting to share earlier, but I think it relates to what Sandy was saying before. I don't think we should be afraid to connect with the people working in our organizations, and I think there's ways to do that respect the various roles and our role as board members. I'm seeking permission to convene that committee and to start those conversations again.
So I think because we really need to let people know we're considering this, I think let's get it on the next agenda. It's typically an item anyway, so we can have it next, and we're meeting next week.
Sounds good.
Okay. Steve.
So, I think we had talked about maybe having students and teachers weigh in. Are they just able to basically provide their feedback in this first round of proposal taking? Kind of, we'd sort of discussed maybe they were giving just proposal whites, and we were going to take that into consideration along with all the other information that we were getting. Just curious if that's still a possibility. I guess anybody can probably provide feedback if they want to in that process. The other point, as long as we're talking about discussing things with folks on staff other than Patrick, is that, we're getting letters, back channel letters from the staff about the situation that we're in. And frankly, I'd rather have a face-to-face discussion with them and have that brought up than read back letters. So I know people are probably nervous about not talking out of place or talking, the throwing a kink in the railroad tracks and getting the train off the tracks, and not doing that maybe intentionally, but maybe doing, causing problems they don't want to cause. But I think it would still be helpful to hear from people directly.
Okay. And Dave?
So this is an excellent conversation. So I think getting more than just board members, getting the public into our schools would make a huge difference in terms of the public's understanding and trust about what's going on in our schools and what we're trying to accomplish. Many years ago, Mount Abe used to have an evening school where individuals in the community would volunteer to teach various courses. When I was teaching at the tech center, we used to have a community service day where we'd bring adults in and do blood pressure tests and change tires, and those kind of vocational things might be a little more difficult to do at Mount Abe. Or having kids come into adults come into our elementary schools for some reason that's pertinent to them, where they can communicate with the teachers and the staff and other adults and see the paintings on the wall and schoolwork the kids are doing. So I think it's really valuable to get us school board members in the school would be valuable, but any and all adults in the community to get in our schools and see what wonderful things are happening there would be helpful.
I love that idea. I would just add at the end, after COVID.
After COVID.
Well, yeah. I know COVID's made so many things more difficult.
Definitely has. Okay, any more around these decision-making tools? I'm not seeing any hands. Patrick, I would assume is if we were meeting in person and you had brought us a hard copy of this list and, a hard copy of what that tab looked like, these will be included in our minutes as just a PDF, not as the worksheet that has all the bells and whistles where you can change stuff, but just as sort of a picture or a copy, I would assume.
Absolutely. Yeah, these are going to be intended for really anyone who wants them. So we're going to continue to kind of polish them up a little bit, but
they'll be what we saw tonight will be available in the minutes of the meeting minutes when they're posted.
Yep.
Okay, great. All right. Next item is the discussion around the survey, and I'm going to let Rob and Krista take this one. So they worked on a few changes to the executive summary, so I'll let you two go ahead.
We weren't really sure if the board wanted us to go through the presentation again, or if we wanted to have a discussion. And we're really, I don't want to speak for you, Rob. I was thinking we would just go with what seemed to make the most sense for folks. Rob, did you want to add anything to that, or did you feel differently about it?
I feel the same way.
Krista, do you want me to go through the list or do you want to call on people?
Oh, are there hands?
Steve has his hand up. I didn't know which way you wanted to handle it.
Sure. Go ahead, Steve. Oh, you're muted, I think.
Oh, yeah, I muted myself when I was already. If you made some changes, is it easy enough just to quickly summarize what those were?
Sorry, I'm just looking for the presentation itself.
And I scanned down through it. It wasn't like there was a strike through and highlight in it. It was.
No. So a couple of things that I can recall off the top of my head, and I'm going to look to Rob to help me flesh it out a little bit. But a couple of things that we did on the presentation where we had gotten some good feedback about including folks that did not respond to a particular question and the percentages as they relate to the whole. So not just showing a response rate for those people that actually answer the question, but for all survey respondents. So we changed the graphs to reflect that. And that is in the very beginning, the first number of slides. Let's see. That was probably the biggest change on my end.
Yeah, and then if you were to compare like presentation 1.0 versus 2.0, we just took out some of the, they're not redundant per se slides, but they sort of paint the same picture. And so we, instead of having, I don't remember the original number, maybe it's close to 80. Now we're down to 50.
Yeah.
And we just took out ones that we didn't, I think that we all sort of realize or are summarized in some of the bullet points in the executive summary. And so the executive summary, the couple changes we made in that were around just some language, placement of a couple paragraphs. And, we tried to use that executive summary to sort of to highlight some of the bigger, I guess, takeaways that as you move through that presentation, you would see the data that supports those sort of bigger picture takeaways that the data points to.
Yeah, so I think since the last time we shared and talked with you guys, there was some cleanup, but the biggest work was really on the executive summary to kind of pull together the overall themes. And then we had also gone through the comments and made those public after we removed identifying information. I think those were the two biggest things.
Well, that must have been a lot of work because there are a lot of comments.
We each took 400 or so.
Holy cow.
I think it is a shame that we weren't able to theme those because I think that would probably be really valuable. But that's quite a bit of time. But I think they're there and you get the gist of what people had on their minds that decided to add narrative to their responses. The other thing I think to note in general is that this was a moment in time and, we went back and forth when we developed the survey on when to roll it out and what to include. And so it is a really great snapshot, but it is a moment in time and it's one data point. So.
Well, nice. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for them regarding the summary? Dave?
So I'm not very good with Google stuff. And I can't find a way to read the qualitative responses. They are much wider than my screen and glom together. Is there a way I can print these things out and so I can read them?
You could, and I wonder, Dave, if you downloaded it into Excel, if that might read easier. Google Sheets sometimes, just reads differently than Excel. I could also attach that as a file to you, and then maybe you'd be able to maybe you could print it that way.
If that's easy for you to do, I don't think I can download it as a Excel file, can I?
If you should be able to, if you go into File and then Download, it should allow you to download it into an Excel document.
Oh, okay. I see that. I just tried to do that. So,
let me know if that doesn't work.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Dave, do you know how to zoom the screen?
Press the control key and roll my mouse.
Okay, just wanted to make sure you knew that.
Yeah, it's still, I could, if I shrink it so that it all fits on my screen.
Yeah, then you need
really tiny print.
Right.
Pardon?
Okay, I just wanted to make sure because some people don't know that trick. So.
Yeah.
It sounds like we need a little Google 101 training next time we do some training.
I'm a Microsoft guy. I really struggle with Google stuff.
All right. Okay. All right, I'll keep moving along. Our next item is a discussion around the process for filling the board vacancy. As we noticed in the consent agenda, Caleb resigned and he will be missed. He was a big part of a lot of the work that has been going on since the beginning of this school district. So I think we all can extend our gratitude for his work. I wanted you all to have a chance to read. I happen to be on the phone with the VSBA, and that's they provided me with the process for filling our vacancy. So once we finish tomorrow, I'll reach out to the Starksboro Select Board and be in contact with their chair about working together to fill the vacancy. And I imagine there'll be a message out and then letters or emails of interest and then some time to schedule interviews to talk to people and then work with the select board to appoint somebody to fill that position. So I just wanted to let you all know what the process was, or if you had any questions or comments. Kevin.
So will that process be by the select board only, or?
No, according to the law, it's in collaboration. We collaborate with the select board to work together. So I envision there, might be interviews and then maybe we make a recommendation based on those interviews to the select board, or maybe we send the people, a certain amount of people on if there's more than one, or so it's in collaboration with them. So Rob, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I guess I don't know if that fully answers. So we as a board would then select the new member from the town of Starksboro, not the town of Starksboro itself?
So we work together with them, and I'd have to I haven't had a conversation with the select board long ago in the past. The board long ago, the board would have a vacancy and the select board would fill it. There would be no conversation between it. They would know the people who were interested would contact the select board, not the school board. And when I talked to Sue at the VSBA, she said it's really work you do together. And some boards might interview and send 2 or 3 candidates onto the select board and maybe the select board wants to interview them, and then they appoint to the position. So some boards just interview and choose somebody and do it themselves, although the language that she sent really said it's a collaboration. I don't know if that answers the question or makes.
Yeah, no, thanks. And then I think that to reiterate Nancy Cornell's point from earlier, I think whether it's someone that resigns or even if someone decides not to run again for the board, if we had a process where, if there's an exit interview that could maybe, I guess, help shed some light if, sometimes it's personal reasons, but also then is there feedback for the board so we operate, better? Or is there something that we can learn from that person so that the person that comes in as a new member also is, caught up to speed? And I think you've done a nice job, Dawn, recently of really working hard this year to get other folks on board. But I think that exit interview piece is it could be a really good tool for us and future boards.
Okay, thank you. Dave?
So I just want to say, I think Caleb has served his community extraordinarily well. I am amazed that he was able to continue to stay on the school board while having a small child and trying to put food on the table and serving the district, 4 towns of R5 in the legislature. It's just a whole lot of work that he's done and served his community extraordinarily well. And I just want to say that.
Thank you. Sandy.
Thank you. So now when I read the section that you gave us as part of the agenda, I actually think it reads that the board ultimately is the one who appoints. It has the authority, but it is supposed to consult with the select board. And so but in the end, the select board, I could see them like nominating or suggesting or letting us know of candidates and then putting them forward. But I think ultimately the board is the one who votes for the person. Just based on the language. Also just based on, I know my husband, when he was appointed in a vacancy to the Lincoln School Board years and years ago, there were 2 candidates and the board ended up voting, because in the end, it was up to them because it's their authority ultimately to appoint. So just a thought when we go through the process. I mean, it should be collaborative too, obviously, because it's from their town.
Yeah, I'm happy to reach out to the VSBA again and get more clarification and make sure I understood what she said. But we did sort of talk about the way things had been done and the way, but I can reach out again.
Right. Yeah, I'm just reading the language, the plain meaning. It should, yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, in the end, we work together, but we vote as a board. The select board actually doesn't, according to this, doesn't have a vote. They just give their opinion or their recommendations, I would imagine.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. All right. Okay. Next is an action item to approve the revised call for proposal based on some information we heard at the last meeting. We made some changes to the document. I think it's ready to go. So we're looking for approval to the changes and to get it out so that the community can start responding.
So moved.
Okay, that was Steve.
I'll second, Kevin.
Okay. Any discussion? Kevin?
So there is the word required used twice. It's going to be required to submit a letter of intent. And it's also going to be required to attend an informational meeting. And I'm assuming those are both, there's an and between those 2 things. So I don't have a hard position on it, but it's very requiring. It's very requiring. So if people don't have their act together and don't attend both of those things, they are out of luck as far as putting in a proposal. And I'm just want to confirm that that's what we really want.
I'm trying to get to that. So let me see where it is.
It's on the second page, so the
Yep.
first two bullets.
Yep, I see that. I think it was just being very specific about that these two things need to happen, that it was clear.
So I
Rob?
guess on the flip side of that, if you don't do either one of those things, your proposal won't be considered.
Well, unless we decide to make a change tonight and before it goes out. That's the way it's written right now. Rob?
Yeah, I mean, I read that too, and I agree with Kevin. I don't know if that language is necessary. I also think, man, that timeline seems pretty quick, considering we're just seeing this tonight as board members, and for folks to have a letter. I actually think the meeting should come before a letter. It's a horse and cart sort of thing, and I think folks attend a meeting and they gather a little more information and they say, all right, maybe this is something we want to put a letter forth and do or not. And so that was my 2 cents, just sort of looking at it. I would put the meeting first and then the letter. And I don't know if that's necessarily fair to make them requisite with the world the way it is, in the sense of maybe the meeting, the letter. I mean, I don't know how I feel either way, but definitely not the meeting. And then if it's just ideas, I don't also think if people just have one idea, not a full proposal, I don't want to shut those out either by just saying that you either have to do this or this or this. Again, I want this to be collaborative and not a competition. So that was my 2 cents.
Andrew?
I have sort of an opposite opinion on the required thing. I think just out of respect to the amount of time the board will incur to take a look at these proposals. And also probably out of respect to Patrick and his team, that if folks don't attend those meetings, then they might be asking a lot of questions that had been previously answered. So I know it's a tough, it's tough to say that it's required, but also folks, it's fairly easy to access these meetings via Zoom. And there's a lot of important information in components, especially with Floyd's spreadsheet and then all the stuff that Patrick would be presenting. I think that's pretty important that people have that information ahead of time so that they have a actually good chance of providing a solid proposal.
Okay. Steve?
Well, I think I would normally agree completely with what Andrew said. It's just the amount of time we have between this going out and the time that the meeting is going to take place for people to. We always struggle with getting the community aware of what we're doing. There's always the people who are at these meetings and attend and pay attention, and then there's life out there. And I think submitting a letter, it's not difficult to require that, and it's going to really help us understand how big our workload is. Attending the meeting, I guess I would be more forgiving if people weren't able to make that under the circumstances. I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. Liz?
I was just hoping that also other people, because it says the people who submit a letter of interest, would that also be a neat TV recorded one that we could watch after, or that other people could attend even if they weren't doing a proposal just out of interest?
I think I missed the end of that. Just
Wondering if people, if like, could I attend just to hear the conversation and hear the information shared, even though I'm not submitting a proposal?
I would assume board members could attend. I would hope that they would not sort of take over the meeting with board questions and let the community and just listen. If board members attend, I would hope they'd be there to listen and hear what's being said and asked to understand, not to comment, kind of thing. Let's see, Dave?
Would it be better to say that those who are submitting a proposal are expected to attend? It's not quite as succinct as closing the door on someone who doesn't show up, but does put it out there that that's what we expect for them to attend those meetings and get the information the district is going to provide.
Sandy Lee, and then I'll go to Kevin, I think.
Thanks, John. So I saw this for the first time last week. And the part I'm having a hard time with, the deadline and the required part, I agree with Kevin, is that on the first page at the bottom, it says, we are inviting the community, students, staff, community members, and business owners to brainstorm ideas and share solutions about how we can address these challenges. So to me, that's like, come one, come all with an idea. But then we're requiring each and every one of these different types of entities, a student, a staff, a community member, to send a letter with a more detailed proposal by the 22nd. And then also then to come to this meeting that's supposed to be a brainstorming on the 24th. So I'm not, it seems to be sending mixed messages. Like when I first saw this and I wasn't reading the fine print, I was thinking this was, we want people to come and to feel free to talk about ideas with obviously someone needs to be running, obviously, this very large sort of meeting. But I just don't know how those two things will work together. Like we're inviting, but saying, no, you can't come if you didn't put a letter in. Do you see what I mean? And I think we're gonna run into people saying, well, wait a second, I thought this was for people to brainstorm, but what's brainstorming if you have to have something that's very specific in writing in order to participate?
Okay. Kevin.
I just want to back up to Liz's question. This is technically going to be a public meeting, isn't it? The informational meeting?
It's a meeting for the community that would be run by Patrick and his team.
And would it be warned as a public meeting?
I don't think so. I don't
know that it's a board meeting, right? Unless there's a quorum of the board. I don't know that it has to be warned. It's not a subcommittee of the board, so it doesn't fall under that category. This is, it's sort of tricky because I think to Sandy's point, we're straddling a couple of different concepts, right? We're straddling the let's bring everybody together and solve this problem together with we're putting out a request for proposals, which the model for that in sort of the construction industry isn't let's bring all the contractors together and the contractors will work together to solve the problem. No, it's we're asking each contractor to tell us the solution to the problem. So I think there's a little lack of clarity there. These last few bullets I think are modeled after the individuals are going to be presenting ideas they have for solutions or paths forward. And part of it, I think, was driven by, to Andrew's point, I think if the board's going to invest lots of time in understanding the ideas, the proposals, the concepts, it's important to know that the people who are offering those ideas were in the know of what they have to work with. So what we're trying to strive for educationally and what the realities are of the finances. So I wonder about the board getting a proposal from someone that doesn't have an idea of what we're striving for educationally or have an understanding of what the financial realities are. But I think in terms of the meeting, I all are welcome from my perspective. It's good information. It's interesting at the very least. That's the only promise I've ever made Floyd, is that this will all be very interesting, and I haven't let him down yet.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think it is like we're trying to address a couple different problems, not problems, but situations. So one is we had this request from members of the community to present a formal proposal. We also want to make sure that other members of the community have an opportunity to participate in a real way in the decision making. And then we also want to make sure we streamline the requests and information that the board and the administration are grappling with. And so I think maybe we're trying to do too many of those things in this proposal. But I think if we are committed to taking better care of how we process requests for information, and we have a good plan for inviting community participation in the decision-making process, and maybe this specific RFP doesn't need to try to meet those needs, and maybe we keep it more on the sort of page 2 version, which is, if and I don't love the required thing either. I think it would be an amazing problem to have if we were overwhelmed with really concrete proposals. I don't think that's the case, but then maybe we deal with that when it happens. So required, I don't love, but I don't know, maybe we just deal with page 2, and with the commitment that we're being really mindful about those other things we're trying to manage.
Okay, Rob? Oh, you're still muted.
I was saying, I second what Krista just said. And then I guess to Kevin's point regarding the meeting, like, if we have a quorum of members, board members that show up at that meeting, wouldn't we have to warn it legally?
Not if you're not doing any board business. So you'd really have to just be listening. The second you start making a plan to take some board action, then you'll be called into question. But if you're listening, it'd be like going to a concert and all of us being at the same concert. We might happen to talk together, talk to each other. We're not having a meeting, but we need to be well aware that if we start down the path of board business, that's where the problem lies. Sarah LaPearl, we haven't heard from you. How about Sarah?
Why not just change the first word instead of required to asked to submit a letter of intent and recommended to attend this meeting?
Okay.
I second that, to make it not required. Obviously, people who are motivated will be sending things, but at least it doesn't clash.
Okay. Steve?
So first of all, I'll make an amendment to my motion to do exactly what Sarah said. You got that, Chris?
So to change the wording to be asked in the first bullet and recommended in the second.
Yes.
So Kevin, since he was the second on your motion, do you have a problem with Steve's amendment to his motion?
No.
Okay.
So I'd also like to make an amendment to switch the meeting and the letter, so that you go to the meeting first and then you submit a letter.
And
the last amendment is to separate out the brainstorming language somehow to, I think, add a paragraph at the end after all of the sort of formal RFP stuff and say we still encourage public participation, and we encourage you to send in your thoughts and your ideas, and here's how you can do that. Even if you're not providing a proposal, you can attend the meetings and you can submit ideas. And lastly, this isn't an amendment. This goes to whether this meeting is a board thing or not. Who is requesting the RFP? Is the board requesting it, or is the superintendent requesting it?
I think it's the board at.
So this meeting is a board action. It probably would be wise to warn it. I think. I'm just saying. I'm not a legal expert, but.
So I hate to do this, but I'm okay with Steve's first amendment to his motion, but the second two, I would rather have them formally amended as opposed to me agreeing to them.
Well, I think we should vote on all the amendments anyway.
Yeah.
I think in terms of whether it's an official board meeting or not, the conversation that evolved at the board meetings, I guess is more accurate, has been that what I've taken away from this is that it's expected of me to hold the informational meeting to provide information to people. There has not been a directive from the board, but I have inferred strongly that is the board's intent. Perhaps if the board did direct me to hold this informational meeting, then it's clearly a meeting that I'm conducting upon direction from the board, but it's my meeting, not a board meeting, and that perhaps clarifies that. And maybe that's not what the board is directing me to do, but I think it is.
Well, aside from, yeah, we should probably separate that out from this action, Don.
Yeah.
We should talk about that separately.
Yep, that should probably be after we iron out these amendments.
Yeah.
So the motion was to approve the call for proposals, and then it was amended with the changes to add asked and recommended to those first two, to those required statements. And Kevin agreed to that, so let's go through that one, I guess. How about that? I don't know how I'm going to keep track of this one. All right.
You and me both.
What's that, Chris?
You and me both.
Okay, well, I got your back.
Okay, I got yours.
All right. So, in the matter of the original motion with the amended changes of changing the first required to asked and the second required to recommended, how do people vote? Let's see, Krista.
Yes.
Okay. And Sandy.
Yes.
Okay, and Rob.
Yes.
Okay, Dave.
Yes.
Okay, Kevin.
Yes.
Okay, Steve.
Yes.
Andrew.
Yes.
Okay, Liz.
Yes.
Okay, Sarah.
Yes.
Okay, and Annie.
Yes.
All right, so that amendment is unanimous. Okay. Then the next amendment around the call for proposals was to switch the meeting and the letter dates, if I understood that, to have the meeting first and the letter asked second. Okay?
So does that make the meeting earlier?
We're gonna have to see because that was probably people's schedule that might make the letter later.
I think we want to move the letter, not move the date of the meeting.
I would agree. And I'm seeing Patrick nod his head as well.
Yeah, we just want to make sure that we have time to make those tools ready and as useful as possible ahead of that meeting.
Absolutely.
So it's so it's so what you're, why there are so many amendments, we should have just voted it down and so is to have the meeting first and change the letter require or ask for later. And Steve, I assume you're going to be the motion maker on this one. Is anybody seconding that amendment?
I'm amending my amendment.
Rob seconds that.
Okay. All right. Now I saw hands up. So Liz had her hand up, I think. And
I just would have seconded that. That's all.
okay. And Sarah, was that what it was? Okay. All right. Now on
Andy has a question.
Okay, Sandy.
I actually don't know what the amendment is right now.
So it's that the meeting would be on that date, but the letter not requirement, but the ask of the letter would be after the meeting.
And so now we're having discussion. Okay.
Yes.
So then the meeting part would be those who are interested in making a proposal are recommended to attend a virtual meeting, something like that.
Yeah,
because we'd have to change that language, just putting that out there. And then those planning to submit proposals
are asked, because we already
asked to submit a letter.
Yes.
Well, see, so this is my discussion because for Patrick, I do this because you're the one running this meeting, right? And the only thing I was thinking is that maybe you wanted to have those letters ahead of time so you could sort of have in your mind sort of the breadth of what you were looking for. But if you don't need that because it's only 2 days ahead of time, then I can see why it might be helpful to hear people who are more serious about making proposals and doing that. That's my question, just because I know you're running the meeting.
That was the intent, was that to have a sense of how many people do we think are interested in even submitting a proposal, because there's a preparation for the volume, and to understand what are we looking at for range of proposal ideas and potential. There's something in here about thoughts about information needed. So a point of clarification, the last sentence in the first bullet on the second page, financial and educational information required to help initiate proposal development, can be found here. The idea was to link those documents that Floyd and I kind of went over earlier.
Oh, okay, I was wondering about
so
that.
Folks could see, all right, so that's the baseline of information. That's helpful. And here's something else I think I would need. And again, we could talk about the timeline, but the idea was if we're really interested in helping provide people with the information they need to do the work they're setting out to do, we can give them a baseline, and that may not hit on all their marks. And it'd be nice to know what else do they need ahead of the meeting, even if it is just a couple of days, to try and be prepared to be as useful as possible. Otherwise, it's the meeting first, and we're just learning, okay, there's 400 people or there's 2, and they don't need any more information, or they need volumes of more information, and we find all of that out in that 1 or 2 hour meeting or whatever it's going to end up being.
Well, if they are looking for that much information, you're going to struggle to put that together in 2 days anyway. So I think you'll find out who's serious about it at the meeting, regardless of whether they put a letter in or not. So.
Yeah, I can live with it either way, but that was the thinking behind at least the sequencing. I think the timeline points are well taken.
Kevin?
I am in favor of leaving the structure as it is now. The letter of interest doesn't have to be complicated. And for all this, then I think when we talked about this before, it was just an indicator of, the real intent of it was to be an indicator of interest for the meeting. So I have reservations about changing, and people people could drop out after one or both of those things. You never really know, but then, the whole intent was to get some indicator of interest before the meeting.
I think to follow up on that too, Kevin, what I thought I took away from conversations that were happening was an interest in the board in knowing that people had the information they needed to put the proposals together, which is sort of what prompted the required piece that landed in there, that it felt like, so agreed, I think people can drop out at any point. The flip side is that, is the board interested in spending time on proposals from people that didn't attend any of this informational session, and therefore presumably don't have the information they need to submit a proposal. And that's when we soften the language here, which I think has value. The trade-off is you may get someone who didn't come to either of these things, and they're going to submit a proposal, and you're going to spend time looking at it.
Just to follow up, I think, if somebody, the proposal will stand on its own merit, regardless of they show up to these meetings. They could do a ton of research, so they may or may not be weak. So that, and then the more problematic thing I said, and why I raised the question originally, was if somebody doesn't attend either of these meetings as it was written before, are we as a board really going to tell them that they can't put in a proposal? So that could cause a whole lot more harm than them not showing up and then coming in with a fantastic proposal.
Steve?
You're muted, Steve.
Sandy's had her hand up for a while.
Okay. I thought it was from before.
Oh, no, I know. You can never tell, right? I try to take it down. I don't mind keeping it at the current with the letter and then the meeting, the way we just agreed to amend it. But I'm wondering if it would make sense in the second bullet to leave open some language of there may be, or depending upon the number of proposals, there might be more than one informational meeting. Because I imagine you're going to get like legitimate questions being asked at that meeting, Patrick, where you may really need to follow up and have another meeting. And so and you have from March 24th till May 4th, you have a long period of time there. So that way, just more, you'll have a better idea. Just a thought, because I can't imagine that will be the only useful informational meeting, if you're willing to, if you think it would be helpful. So we can vote on the other one, but I just something saying, depending on interest or depending on how many people put forth, interests. But, we may, just so that people know that this isn't it before all of a sudden you jump to this proposal part. Just putting that out there.
Steve?
Yeah, it may not in the end be horribly critical which comes first, but I think what I heard originally that made me suggest the motion was the fact that you might end up with a bunch of letters from people who, once they go to this meeting, are like, what? And don't really want to propose something, or don't understand it and figure out that's not really what they want to do. And you might have an inflated number of letters. But I guess that's, it's probably you'll probably have hiccups in this no matter which way you sugar this out. So I think we should just vote on it one way, Don, and if people aren't for that, then we'll leave it the way it is. So.
Okay. Yep, that's what I think. We'll see where people land on this one. Okay, so I just want to check. Annie, Denny, did you have any comment?
No, I'm just going to take it all in.
Okay, all right. Let me check the other page. There we go. Make sure nobody's got their hand up over there. All right. So this motion is to amend the language around the changing the meeting and the letter. So having the meeting first and the letter be second. So that's the question. Are you in favor of switching it for the meeting first and the letter second? Krista?
Can I abstain? I'm a little confused still. I don't know. I'll go with whatever everybody thinks. I've got a little muddled and I'm a little tired and it doesn't seem to matter that much.
Okay.
I'm going to abstain.
Sandy?
I'm going to say no.
Okay. All right. Rob?
Yes.
Okay. Dave?
Abstain.
Kevin?
No.
Okay. Steve?
I'll keep it interesting. Yes.
Jeez, thanks. Andrew? Uh-oh. Did we lose Andrew?
He's there.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
So this is, they come to the meeting first, decide they want to put in the letter, then they put the letter on.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, yes.
You're in favor?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. All right, Liz?
No.
Okay, Sarah?
I don't honestly care. I don't mean to say isn't it just like you're asked to do it by a certain date? Like, why not just make them the same day and then call it? I don't know. I'm gonna say no.
Okay, and Annie?
No.
Okay, so that amendment does not pass because we have 5-3 with 2 abstentions. So that language does not pass. Right now, it's going to stay the way it is with the 2 required change. Okay, then the other piece, Steve, was to amend the language about the brainstorming at the bottom of it to more encourage the public to be a part of the process and still encourage people to send your ideas and attend the meeting.
Right, and put that after all of the.
As a 4th bullet?
Yeah, right.
Okay. All right, so that's Steve's. Rob, are you seconding? No.
Sorry. No, I have a question, but it's for later, I think.
All right, so, well, we need a second if we're gonna.
I'll second.
All right, Krista? Okay, now Rob. Everybody's getting a little punchy.
No, I guess I don't know if it's not necessarily relevant to this amendment. I'm just still stuck on if the dates are going to be still the same. Did we change those yet?
No, because I think the 24th is what works for the Patrick and his team that would be doing the meeting. So I don't see that date's changing.
But I mean, sorry, in the letter date, I mean, is there a rush then to have those letters in by the 22nd? I just don't, unless we have an incredible way to disseminate this proposal or RFP. I think that's a little crunched. I apologize. I should have maybe made an amendment, or I don't really necessarily understand the process, but sorry.
I think it's fair to say the dates are flexible from my perspective. I think it's important to get it right more than it's important to try and shoehorn anything into a particular date that's picked right now.
and I say that because if we change the date of the letter, then the letter could come after the meeting. That's just where my head's going, and I don't.
Krista.
Don't go there, Rob. I just, the date thing, maybe there's a way to, I'm just trying to figure out what our timeline is and if we push it back a little bit more, or can we just approve the proposal with people need a deadline.
I think we need to.
Sorry, I'm talking out loud.
We need to finish the amendment, then we can talk about revisiting the previous one.
Right. Okay. Can I say something about your amendment? I like it. I think we should just get rid of the language above around the brainstorming and put that bullet down at the bottom.
All right, Sandy.
I'm sorry, what would the bullet say again?
We still encourage the public to be part of the process and for you to send your ideas and attend meetings.
Okay, so we're not inviting them to attend this informational meeting. Is that?
No, we are. We could say we still invite you to attend, or just still send your ideas and invite you to attend the meeting. Anybody can attend the meeting. They don't have to be submitting a proposal. Maybe they just want to attend the meeting to understand more.
But are we saying then that they can't speak up or add anything then if they don't do either, like the letter? It sounds like they can still participate and speak.
I think somebody said we'd be hard pressed to turn somebody down if they showed up with an idea, even though, they hadn't. I don't hear that we're going to say that we're saying, yeah, this is it. If you don't do this, you don't get to come and present to us. I don't.
So just so I'm clear on the motions, we were going to take out the language on the first page under details. Well, see, it says details.
Yes, that language right there.
And then, so if we took out that language, then I guess I would say, can we just say we are inviting? Because it's not, they don't know that we weren't inviting them, I don't think, right? Instead of saying still inviting. We are inviting community staff, blah, 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 blah.
So
Take the still out.
I think they're going to have that removed completely and just add the fourth bullet down there at the bottom that said, we still encourage the community to be part of the process, and please send your ideas and invite you to attend the meeting.
Right. Okay. I just don't think we need this still. I'm just, because it makes it sound like we weren't inviting them in the first place. We are inviting them. We're inviting other people to come too. But I'll leave it to you guys.
I agree with that, Don. Yeah. The still is something you would do if you knew you were striking out the sentence before, but you just say we encourage the public to attend the meeting and to submit their ideas outside of presenting a formal proposal.
Okay.
Yeah. In the spirit of thinking out loud, which is, I think, a lot of what we're doing right now, which I think is helpful, and we're getting a lot of interesting ideas floating around, which I think is good. A wondering is sort of coming to mind for me. I'm thinking back to 2 falls ago now. And we had multiple sessions that were highly facilitated with hundreds of community members that were brainstorming sessions that produced a long list of ideas that we engaged in a process really deliberatively over the next several months to whittle down to a smaller number of ideas that then got much more attention and analysis, that then got whittled down again to a smaller number of ideas that ultimately led to me making a recommendation. I'm wondering what are the impacts of going back to the brainstorming step without the facilitation and support and all the work that went into it the first time around, and in what way does that advance the conversation? In what way might that bring the conversation back? I just think it's important to understand that. I think there's value in it still, but I think it's important to understand the implications and understand the process and what's happened getting us to where we are today.
I think the intent of my amendment is not to have people show up at this meeting and do a brainstorming session. The idea is to not have that happen. The idea is to basically ask for proposals, say we're having a meeting to talk about that. You still have to present a letter, or we're asking you to. But we're not, the last bullet is basically to alert people that we're not discouraging further communications with them and further, and anybody being able to attend a meeting to hear what's going on. But this is, we don't want this to turn into a free-for-all.
So I was trying to write down what you had said. So what, the last bullet, Steve, you're saying the message should be more, we encourage the public to be a part of this process. Please share your ideas, and we invite the public to attend this the meeting. Is that more what the idea you were going with? Still?
I don't know. I mean, another way to think about it is to think about what Krista was saying earlier, where we might be trying to do too much with this thing, and maybe we just not put that bullet in at all, exclude the language from the first page, and then issue a second kind of communication to folks that we can think about more clearly about how we're going to go forward with getting, public feedback, rather than trying to deal with that in this RFP.
Yep.
That's probably the cleaner thing to do. So I'm going to actually change it to say let's just strike it and not add the bullet at all.
And remove the old language under details?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we can craft something separate to encourage public comment.
Okay.
Because this will just get too crazy.
Okay. So it's remove the old language and no fourth bullet.
Yes.
Okay. Well, Sandy, you have your hand up?
So I'm fine with Steve's proposal to take out the first page bullet. I still would like something, not even as a fourth bullet, but on the second page, but a third bullet right under, before sending proposals in May. So that the May, proposals are due on May 4th, I think should be last if we put that there. And then, but as a third bullet, still let it be known that, people can attend. I just, if we take everything out, then I think as a board, we really have to, it's important that we, that is what Krista has suggested that we need to think about is how do we engage input from teachers and students and business owners. Teachers aren't going to be submitting a letter, I don't think, right? I don't even know if they think that would be appropriate. In fact, I think they might think it was frowned upon. And one of the things I liked about this bullet is I thought, oh gosh, teachers are being invited to freely be able to talk about their ideas without any retaliation. Does that make it? And retaliation is a little bit of a strong word, but I just felt like it was this lovely idea of you're welcome to give some ideas and thoughts without there being any backlash, right? Because this was versus, and I agree, we're doing two different things. So if we really are trying to hone down like some serious proposals, I feel like there has to be an outlet where can teachers put a proposal together and not get backlash? I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that's appropriate or not, which is why I thought I was sort of, when I saw the first page, I thought, what a wonderful thing, Patrick, for you to put out, because you were definitely saying, hey, I'm opening myself up to your proposals and I'm going to let you speak your mind and have this be a sort of a transparent process, which I think is a lot of value. And I'm worried about taking that out altogether. I do understand the concern that it's going to get bogged down, but I do think that if teachers are there, if they want to make comments about proposals that are being made, I'd love to hear what they have to say without a teacher or a staff or a business member feeling like it's going to be somehow affecting them somehow. Does that make sense? So I was really heartened by that. So I'm really worried about that piece completely being out of it.
But I think the meeting isn't really about giving presentations or sharing your ideas. I think it's really about learning about the problem and how we want to, and the information that you need to know to give a proper idea.
Which is why I kind of regret the reversal of, I voted no against reversing the direction, because when at our last meeting last week, I got the impression that this informational meeting was to help people have tools to be able to make a proposal, right? So, and that was the goal. And so it's truly informational. And so I guess I see where, why the reverse order was important. And then people could hear really what's happening and then decide if they were going to come forward with the proposal, bring a letter of intent. But then I would think that there should be something else before now in the end proposal, potentially for more informational meeting, like maybe another one. Not to make your job a lot harder, Patrick, but I can just see you wanting to be able to figure out how to way to get information out. But then again, if people show up at that meeting, you could probably disseminate it on a website and they could access it that way, because clearly they would have been interested at that point. So I actually now really regret not reversing it, because to me, this is an informational meeting. So people, even teachers, who if they want to give input somewhere else as a community member, can put a proposal together. Yeah, sorry. I've heard.
Krista.
I'm really hoping that we can make sure there's places for input from all the stakeholders, and I'm making an assumption, so it could really be wrong, but I feel like my assumption is the majority of folks want to make sure they have a really active voice in this decision, and the minority of folks are working on a really specific proposal. And I want to make sure we hear from the majority input into the different options, because I think that's really critical. I'm just not sure that's going to come in the form of a fully baked alternative. I think it's more likely to come in the form of, making sure there's really robust places for us to offer that opportunity for input. And if next meeting you vote to allow the Community Engagement Committee to convene again, we can figure that out.
Okay. So we had a motion that is
The current motion is to strike the bottom paragraph completely and not put it back in the document.
All right. So that's the motion.
That's the motion.
Strike the bottom paragraph of the first page. Okay. So that's what you're voting on. So let's see. Krista.
Was there a second?
Yeah, Krista had originally seconded, right?
Yeah, early on.
Yeah. Okay. So in regards to striking the bottom part of the first page, no bullet or added language. Krista, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay. Sandy.
I'm going to abstain this time.
Okay. Not here. Rob.
I'm going to vote no.
Okay. Dave.
Yes.
Okay. Kevin.
No.
Steve.
Yes.
Andrew,
Yes.
Liz,
Abstain.
Sarah,
Yes.
okay, Annie,
Abstain.
I put a change my vote. Am I allowed, Dawn?
yes, what is your change?
I'm going to vote no.
So you're opposed. So we have 5 in favor, 3 opposed, and 3 abstentions. So members are in favor of deleting the language on the bottom of the first page and no additional bullet on that one. Okay, so we'll make the adjustments to that and get it out as soon as possible so that people can begin work. Before you leave this, is there any interest in a motion in direct the superintendent to hold the meeting on the 24th? Or to hold the meeting, I guess we don't have to set a date, to hold a virtual information meeting.
Just a point of order. Did we actually vote to approve this after all the amendments?
Oh, you're right, Kevin. All right.
I was gonna say the same thing.
All right, sorry. All right, so final, jeez, Louise.
And there may be more amendments from all the hands that are up.
Oh, let's see, Rob.
Yeah, just so I'm clear at the end of the day, because the way we changed the language in those bullet points, someone could still submit a proposal even if they don't submit a letter, because I still am fearful of that turnaround time. If we're asking people by the 22nd of March, I just don't think it's a fair amount of time.
Okay, Sandy, before I go to you, I'm just going to check. Somebody else's hand flew up and I can't find them now. All right, they're gone. Sandy?
I make a motion to strike the first bullet. To just strike the first bullet on the letter and just have the second bullet be those who are planning to submit proposals are recommended to attend a virtual informational meeting on March 24th, 2021 from 6 to 8. And if based on that meeting, later we decide that we want to send something out to ask people to send a letter of intent or do something more, we can do that. So, you know, we can disseminate more information between the 24th of March and the actual due date. So my motion again is to strike the first bullet and to amend the second bullet to those who are planning to submit proposals are recommended to attend a virtual informational meeting on March 24th, 2021.
Okay, is there a second for Sandy's motion?
I'd second.
Okay. Discussion? Okay. So the motion was to amend the proposal, what do we call it? The call for proposals, to strike the first bullet and amend the language in the second, what is now the second bullet to say, those who are planning to submit a proposal are recommended to attend the virtual meeting on the 3/24/21. Okay, so, yeah, all right. So in regards to that motion, let's see. Krista, how do you vote?
So there's no letter required.
That's what Sandy's proposing, yes.
Oh, okay. No.
Okay. Okay, Sandy?
Yes.
Okay. Rob?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Kevin?
No.
Steve?
I'm going to abstain.
Andrew?
No.
No. Liz?
No.
Sarah LaPearl?
No.
Okay. Annie? Denny?
No.
Okay, so the motion does not carry. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to 3 with 1 abstention. So that one does not carry. Okay. So back to where we are with all the revisions. So right now, we need final approval on the motion that for the call for proposals, that in the first bullet changes the required to asked, and in the second bullet changes it to recommended. And then I'm reading my notes. There's the second motion was not, and then to remove the old language up on the first page. Was that one passed? Okay, so that's what our final consideration is for the changes that asked and recommended, and to remove the language on the first page. So for that final vote, Krista, how do you vote?
We didn't address the date issue though, did we?
Nobody brought that up.
I guess I vote yes.
Okay. Andy?
For the whole, as a whole,
Yes.
I don't know why we couldn't have done it in parts. We approved the change of the bullets by the whole board, and then we decided to keep the top part out by a vote. Why do we have to vote for both of them together? We already have the result by each separate motion.
Because they were amended, so we just approved each amendment, and then we have to approve it as a whole.
There was a motion to approve the whole thing, and then it was amended twice.
Yep, so we have to
go back to the original
motion. Sure. Okay. With the caveat that I hope to gosh we're going to have a good community input from everyone, because we took out the bullet, the bottom of page 1, I would vote yes. We just need to get this out.
Okay. Rob? You're still muted.
Yeah, sorry, I still concerned with that date turnaround, but I guess you don't have to submit a letter by the 22nd to still be able to put forth a proposal, that we work as a community engagement committee to engage more community members with ideas and stuff like that. We got to get something out there. So yes.
Okay. Dave? You're muted, Dave. Nope, still muted.
How about now?
Okay, now we can hear you.
So I guess I'll vote yes, although I'm pretty unclear about what I'm voting for.
Okay, Kevin?
I'd like to make the observation that there was less discussion on the shape of the table at the Paris peace talks than on this document, and I support it and will vote yes.
Thank you, Steve Rooney.
Yes.
Okay. Andrew?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Annie?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, the motion passed with all those changes. Patrick, I'll make the changes so that it's easier and get it to you in the morning. Okay. Now, it's now 9:31, and we have two more items, neither of which I think we can devote time to at this point to have a rich discussion about either of them. So,
I make a motion to table both of those action items.
okay. So Andrew is making a motion to table. Is there a second?
Annie.
Annie? Any discussion?
Yes, I have something really quick.
Krista?
I just want to direct folks to the updates to the website that I think I briefly mentioned before, but that are part of our communication. So if people go to the MAUSD homepage and then facilities planning, we updated it today, and there are a bunch of resources organized in a little bit more of a user-friendly way. So I wanted to make sure people were aware of that, but it's editable and can be approved upon. So if you have any suggestions, let me know, but it's a starting point.
I saw it and it looks great. Very good job.
Okay. All right. So all those in favor of tabling the item 4 and item G, please say aye.
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 Let you do it by voice that time. All right. Sounds like everybody's in favor of that. We don't need an executive session. Public comment. Anybody got their hands up? Oh, Herb.
Yes, thank you, Don. I guess my takeaway from the initial discussion is that the board didn't want to consider the community's proposal for, or some members of the community's proposal for a more, I guess, robust and transparent planning tool. I think Floyd did a good job, but I think he'd admit it was fairly narrow in terms of the database that was being proposed. And if that's the only tool that folks in the community have on which to base the proposal, they're going to have a tough time. I would urge you to, seriously consider what we put together in terms of a planning tool. It has a lot more data points. I think it would help answer a lot of the questions that people have around facilities, planning, costs, all that sort of stuff. But frankly, I'm worried at this point, if the board really isn't willing to discuss it, you're going to be going, you got a timeline where people have to submit letters of intent by the 22nd, if I recall. And no indication that they're going to have the information needed to put together a proposal. So that's a concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, Tim.
Yeah, thanks, Dawn. And I want to thank Krista for talking about use of language earlier in the meeting. It really was important. And, I do hope, it sounds like you guys are pretty tired. I understand that. But that next meeting, you guys really talk about that a bit more. There was some language that if I had children at the last meeting, I would have been disappointed, would have to talk with those kids about certain historical uses of different terms. That was really disappointing last meeting. And I thought about it a lot over the past week and why it bothered me so much. And I think what bothered me the most was actually not that it was said, because sometimes something gets said and the person doesn't know that the meaning was what it was historically. But for everyone to remain silent for a full week, maybe thinking about stuff, reading emails. That was disappointing. And it was particularly disappointing that I wasn't directly called out tonight. So that is what it is. I also will say that whether it's a school board, whether it's a board of directors for a privately held company, there needs to be an avenue where, whether it's a shareholder in the private sector or a voter or child or parent, that you can reach out to the board separately, and that there will not be an immediate inclusion of, in this case, not immediately including Patrick, because that's not fair to him either. There needs to be that direct avenue with the directly elected and the voting public or the interested shareholders. And so I just want you to think about that. I think that the board needs training from some outside entity. Dave Sharp has talked about this on two things: board function and how to interact with staff in these public contexts, because it's unfair to sort of do it on the fly. I understand that. And the other thing is the use of language in the year 2021. So I hope you guys all reflect on that. And the last thing I'll sort of conclude with is that I have I would say very little tolerance for public bodies that do not answer direct questions. And I used to file shareholder resolutions with ExxonMobil, and I could ask them things: how many women are a part of your organization? How many new hires did you make last year? And they would give me the exact number because we were a shareholder for that company. That is disappointing, that I got more transparency out of ExxonMobil than when I ask simple questions of this board. And Herb has been talking about it for a while. So I just want that to sit with you as well. When I ask a question, or when any member of the public asks a question, how many coaches are employed by the Mount Airy School District? I think the answer has sort of somehow come out after 5 or so months now, but it didn't initially. And that's disappointing, because then it looks like you're hiding something, and you're probably not. But that's disappointing. And then the other thing I'll say on that note is that the central office should be a place where we can just see how many people work there, what are the salaries, the same way every other aspect of the public sector works. And if you look around the state of Vermont, and it'd be interesting to compare how other districts work these sort of discussions, because it is tricky. But when I was a state employee, my salary was public every single year. My benefits were public every single year. People deserve to see that information. And it shouldn't be something to be ashamed of. That's what we're spending our money on. And it was really enlightening to hear Floyd talk about the 13% increase in healthcare as an expectation. It's enormous. Think about that over 10 years. And we just deserve to know the component aspects of per pupil, because it just is unfair to just assume that we are not entitled to that information as members of the public. So that's a lot to reflect on. I listened to most of this call driving back from work in Rutland, and I think there were certain parts of tonight's meeting that were really encouraging, but I'm really disappointed about the way that the last meeting went. So I'll leave it there. I know you don't like engaging in back and forth during this time, and I don't know that I can make the next meeting, but I'm expressing frustration held by a lot of different people, many of whom are on tonight's call because they were so upset about last week.
Okay, thank you. All right, I don't see any more hands. Chris, do you happen to have up the meeting eval?
I do.
Okay.
What is the level of engagement of all board members, high or low?
Well, I see a thumb up, 2 thumbs.
With high? Just nod your head and yes if you agree.
I'm seeing more thumbs come up.
Okay. Was the agenda followed, yes or no?
Yep. Nods and thumbs.
Okay, any comments? Okay. Does the chair effectively establish the agenda and materials for distribution to the board? Yes or no?
See thumbs.
Okey-dokey. Any comments?
I have a comment.
Okay.
I mentioned it earlier in the meeting, but I will look at how agendas are developed. Remember we talked about how we can get those requests in that form. So my only comment would be just the process of forming the agenda. I'm hoping that we can have follow up on Dawn of that form that we can do to submit to help build the agenda as a board.
Yep.
Thank you.
And I think Rob had his hand up too.
Yeah, I appreciated, Don, the like the chair cliff notes that you had at the top of the agenda. That was really helpful for me. I guess sometimes I get lost in the what's going to be discussion versus what's going to be an action, which obviously includes a discussion. So thank you.
Anything else?
Oh, I'm not seeing anybody else.
All right. Is the chair effective in fostering a professional culture regarding fair and open deliberation, full participation of all members, and ensuring the integrity of the board process? Yes or no?
Yes.
Any comments? Okey-dokey. Other feedback for the chair? Okay. What went well with the meeting?
Got that RFP out.
What suggestions do you have for ways to improve future meetings?
Rob.
I have a question. Just in regards to the RFP, that whole amendments to the amendments, we were running circles, I feel like. Don, I guess as a chair, do you have to be the one that's sort of taking those notes and going through that? Could we get some extra help so that you can more facilitate maybe the discussion and not have to go back and forth? That's just a question.
At some point, I have to be able to read back what everybody is getting. So I try to take notes so that I can keep track of where we are, kind of thing.
It's a little tough when 13 people are trying to word craft.
It is very.
No matter what you do.
Yep.
Anybody else?
Nope. I'm not seeing it.
That's a wrap.
Okay. All right. I think that was the last one, right?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn at 9:48?
Yes, I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll
All right.
second.
Sarah LaPearl and Andrew second. All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. All right.
Thank you, Floyd.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.